Vice Chairman of West Berkshire Council. Following the government's announcement regarding the relaxation of COVID restrictions, the Council has reviewed its advice and guidance to ensure that the ongoing health and safety of those attending the Council offices is protected. To this end, we continue to sit in a suitable distance apart from one another, and we are recommending that individuals please wear a mask when not seated. Any members of Council who are in attendance remotely will be entitled to speak and ask questions when invited to do so by myself, but will not be invited to partake in the vote on any of the items. The councillors' attendance via Zoom, I believe, are Councillor Hilary Cole, Councillor Clive Hooker and Councillor Garth Simpson. The officers in attendance are Nigel Lynn, the Chief Executive, on my right, Executive Directors Sue Halliwell and Joseph Holmes, and Paul Coe, the Service Director for Adult Social Care. Sarah Clark, the Monitoring Officer on my left, will be the Legal Advisor to the meeting. I'm assisted by Vicky Yull, the Clerk to the meeting, and by Thomas Dunn, who will be acting as the Zoom host. Welcome to those honorary aldermen who have joined us. I understand that's Paul Bryant, Andrew Rolls and Quentin Webb. Welcome. The meeting is being live streamed via YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Can I please ask everyone present in the meeting to make sure they switch on their microphones when invited to speak and off at all other times, and to speak directly into the microphones when invited to speak. If we hear the evacuation alarm this evening, we must leave the building immediately. Proceed via the safe emergency exit route, which will be shown to us by the train officers on site. And please follow any of their instructions. The assembly point is the Newbury Station multi-storey car park. And anyone requiring assistance down the stairs will be assisted accordingly by the trained officers. I will now ask Sarah Clark to outline how the meeting will be conducted.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. Each member will be asked to vote on an item using the microphone technology. If any member has difficulty using the technology, please raise your actual hand and an officer will assist. If necessary, members' votes will be recorded manually, or in some cases, voting may take place via a show of hands instead. If we need to adjourn the meeting at any point, the chairman will adjourn and will advise as to the revised time and date of the meeting. If it is a short adjournment, you will be able to rejoin this Zoom meeting. Otherwise, a fresh appointment will be sent out. Do members have any questions about how the meeting will be conducted? Thank you, Chairman.
I see no hands. Before we start the meeting this evening, I would like to formally thank members for their conduct and discipline at the last meeting 2 weeks ago. It showed to the public, I believe, how a district council can effectively conduct business on their behalf, and I will hope that the same discipline and respect will be demonstrated tonight. Also, for your information this evening, and I believe you've already been notified of this, but members, please note that I plan to change the order of business somewhat from the published agenda, so that we will debate items that are linked together logically by subject matter. Notably, public questions will move in front of the petition item, motions will be moved up in the order just behind the petitions, and item 18 moved back after members' questions. If that's confusing, don't worry. I'll introduce each item clearly and I'm sure it'll be fine on the night. Do we have an apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. We have received apologies from councillors Adrian Abbs, Lee Dillon, Nasser Hunt and Keith Woodhams, from Officer Andy Sharp, and from Honorary Alderman Adrian Edwards, Graham Jones and Honorary Alderwoman Molly Locke. I don't know whether there are any other apologies.
Any more from the floor? No. Councillor
Simpson, Chairman.
Thank you. We'll go to item 2, the Chairman's remarks. I'm sad to report the death of former Council Chairman James Moll, who passed away recently. We'd like to reflect on that. Can I invite Councillor Jeff Brooks to say a few words, please?
Thank you, Chairman. James Moll was elected to the old Newbury District Council in 1991 for Hungerford, and he served for 16 years on the District Council and then onto the Unitary Authority. In fact, he 5 wins on the trot before, sadly, 2 losses. Nice man, well known in Hungerford, worked very hard, a man who worked very hard for his constituents or ward members, generous of spirit. I don't think anybody across the chamber anywhere disliked James. And as you say, he was a former chairman of the old district council. Accountant by trade, he was very much into cars. I couldn't mention a car without him telling me all the technical detail. The leader is remembering that. And although there's a lot of people who don't know him, they think he's just another old councillor, he was yet quite a young man, I think early 70s. And, you know, for 16 years, that's a lot of public voluntary work, largely voluntary. And he will be missed. He was on the parish council as well. And just a nice man to know, a nice man to have in a group, a sense of solidarity with his members, but also could easily be friendly to anybody across the chamber. Doesn't happen with everybody, but we do our best. James did his best, and this council and the public in Hungerford have lost something by his passing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Doherty, I believe you want to say a few words too. So could we get some help for Councillor Doherty?
Quite happy for the leader not to be heard.
Hang on, I'm on. Apologies, I'm on. Thank you. User error. I just wanted to reflect on James Moll because I didn't know James as a councillor. I knew James as the treasurer of the family support charity Home Start that I worked for many years, and James was my treasurer, and he was a lovely man, and we used to enjoy talking cars together because he knew I came from a motor trade background, but we also enjoyed talking about stiff bears, which he had a huge collection of. Yes, his wife collected them, and he was always telling me about how much each of these bears cost, because he was, you know, he did our accounts and books, and I just wanted to echo, there are some great people out there, and he was one of the most generous, lovely men that I've worked with, who gave his time so freely, and it's a really sad loss for the community of Hungerford and for your party in particular, but for us all.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Councillor Vickers, you have your hand raised.
I was just going to say, just add a couple of sentences to what Councillor Brooks has said, because I remember James back in 1991 when we were, along with 23 other Liberal Democrat colleagues, we were elected to Newbury District Council. So my memories of him go back quite a long way. And I remember him as a good-humoured, friendly and supportive colleague. We did have some areas of disagreement, and I didn't share his fascination with cars, I'm afraid. And I do remember when he had the opportunity to be chairman first time, he deferred it or offered to postpone it because he was aware that his skills as a financial portfolio holder were important to the council. So he was, as has been said, generous in spirit. He worked very hard on behalf of the council and his community, and I'm sure he'll be very, very missed, sadly missed.
Thank you. Members, as a mark of respect, could we please rise and perform a minute service? Thank you, members. I'm sure that we're all absolutely appalled by the tragic and unnecessary suffering being experienced by the people of Ukraine at the moment. We all want to help and will be aware of the activities happening at a national level. Tonight, we have a motion on our agenda, which I hope will discuss and highlight the Council's response locally. There have been 12 events attended on behalf of the Council since the last regular Council meetings, including several tree planting ceremonies, both in remembrance of colleagues lost or affected by COVID and to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. I must now thank Councillor Graham Pask for stepping in at short notice for some of those recently, when both the Chairman and I were isolating because of COVID. The Chairman has asked me specifically to mention his attendance at the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service, where amongst 6 awardees, Homestart West Berkshire was recognised for its magnificent achievements. I will also mention that today has been a dedicated social care day of remembrance and reflection, a day to reflect upon the important work of the social care sector. It is a national initiative, but West Berkshire Council staff marked it with a minute's silence this morning to remember who we've lost in the last 2 years and to thank those involved in the vital care work of colleagues and care workers. Thank you. Could we turn to item 3, the minutes, please? I move that the minutes of the meetings of Council held on the 2nd December 2021 and 18th of January 2022 be signed as correct records. Is there a seconder, please?
Chairman, I'm happy to second those.
Thank you. Would any member like to propose an amendment to the 2nd of December 21 minutes? Would any member like to propose an amendment to the 18th of January 2022 minutes? Thank you, members. I will now ask Sarah Clark to conduct a vote on the minutes of the 2nd of December meeting.
Thank you. If I could now ask all members in the chamber to vote by using their microphones. The vote will be displayed on the screen in real time, and I will indicate when that vote has concluded. This is just for the 2nd of December meeting initially. Chairman, we have a number of members who...
Members, if you touch the screen first, it will come up.
Yes, no. Yeah, we're voting for the minutes, aren't we? Yes.
Has every member voted who wishes to?
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that 34 members have voted in favour of those minutes, so they would be approved.
Thank you very much. Can I ask you now to conduct the vote on the minutes of the 18th of January 2022 meeting?
So thank you, members. Again, in a moment, your microphone screens will be displaying the fresh vote. I think that is now available, and this is for the minutes of the 18th of January. Thank you, Chairman. All members have now cast their vote on in relation to that item, and I can confirm that the minutes of the meetings of the 2nd of December 2021 and the 18th of January 2022 have been approved.
Thank you very much. And I'll sign those in a moment. Item 4, do we have any declarations of interest?
Thank you, Chairman. We've had a number of declarations of interest. Councillor Tom Marino has declared a personal and another registrable interest in respect of agenda items 5 and 19 and motions B and D, as his partner and brother both work for Thames Water. Councillor Marino will leave the room during the debates on those items. Councillor Richard Sumner has declared a personal and other registrable interest in respect of agenda item 19, motion G, as he is employed by the Royal Berkshire NHS Trust. Councillor Bridgman has declared a personal and another registrable interest in respect of agenda items 5 and 19, as in motions B and D, as he is in receipt of a pension from Thames Water, and in respect of agenda item 19, motion G, as a council nominated governor at Royal Berkshire Trust, and in respect of item C, agenda item 19, Councillor Bridgman has another registrable interest as his wife is in receipt of a pension. I think we've also had a declaration of interest from Councillor Doherty, who has declared a personal and other registrable interest in respect of agenda item 19, motion C, as her spouse is in receipt of a pension from a related company. I don't know, Chairman, if there are other declarations of interest from the floor, and I can see Councillor Drummond has his hand raised.
Councillor Drummond? Okay. Councillor Cole?
Difficulty hearing the because of the noise outside, but if my name was not included, I need to declare in respect of 19 D and C.
Can I ask Councillor Cole, is that a personal interest? Or
Personal interest.
And so you're going to remain in the chamber and participate?
Happy to walk out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Any further declarations of interest? No, I see none. Thank you, members. We're now going to move to public questions. I would like to thank the members of the public who have submitted questions this evening. Please note that the questions will appear on the screen and will be answered by the relevant portfolio holder. I understand that Mr. John Bibbings and Mr. Dave Allen are not present, and they will therefore receive written responses to these questions. However, I believe Mrs. Joan Stacey is here with a question. And can I invite Councillor Richard Sumner to respond to that question?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Stacey, for your question. The Transport Services team have not produced any printed timetable guides since the start of the pandemic. The team is looking to print the next edition of the travel guide during the summer, which will be available at the library. In honesty, there's little point in reprinting the current edition of the guide, as we know there are changes coming shortly to some of the timetables. In the meantime, we are asking Newbury Library to display a larger version of the map in the current guide, which shows the location of bus stops in the town.
Do you have a supplementary question, Stacey?
Yes, please. I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity of raising this issue at this meeting, because I feel it's very important for older people, their well-being, and for green issues around the town, as I stated in my submitted information. I was very pleased when I went to the library and I saw this. I thought, oh good, the council's done the right thing, and they've sent out this document which says maps, etc. on it. Not exactly very easy reading when you're at a bus stop in the wind and rain, but nevertheless.
Mrs. Stacey, do you actually have a question, please?
The question is actually, pleased as I was to see it, I did feel that when you are making information available to people, you need to, I would be grateful if you would consider it necessary to look at the group of people that you're addressing and you're helping, and perhaps seek some information from them, do a bit of research and find out the sort of thing that they would find actually useful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Sumner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Stacey. I'm happy to take those points on board, and I'll discuss how we can best achieve that with officers, and hopefully we'll get something in a timely fashion for you.
Timely, right. How am I allowed to ask how long timely is?
I'm afraid not. But,
No, I thought not. No, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Go out.
That concludes members' questions for the public questions. Could we move therefore to item 5, petitions? Members, I'd like to inform you how the petition for debate will be managed at this evening's meeting. In accordance with paragraph 1.4 of the Council's procedure rules for dealing with representations, the petition organiser will have 5 minutes to introduce the petition, and the petition will then be discussed by councillors for a maximum of 15 minutes. This time limit is specified in the Constitution and cannot be extended during this meeting. The Council, after the debate, has 3 options for dealing with petitions. Firstly, to take the action that the petition suggests. Secondly, not to take the action for the reasons put forward in the debate. Or thirdly, to commission a further investigation into the matter. Members may propose one of the options, which, if seconded, will be put to a vote. The vote on any proposal which has been seconded will take place at the end of the debate to ensure that members can consider all the comments prior to voting. Based on proportionality, the Conservative group will be allocated 8 of these minutes, the Liberal Democrat group will have 6 minutes, and the Green Party 1 minute. And I'll take them in the order. The wording of the petition is set out on page 47 of your agenda pack, and I'll now ask the petition organiser, Councillor Steve Masters, to introduce the item. You have 5 minutes, Councillor Masters.
Thank you, Chairman, councillors, aldermen, members of the public watching online and outside. Sewage in our rivers can happen for a number of reasons, but the main culprit is something called a combined sewer outflow, or CSO. However, this is only meant to occur under exceptional circumstances, but this term seems to be open to interpretation. Some CSOs have been recorded discharging raw sewage into rivers when there hasn't been rain for days. Clearly, the current arrangement isn't working. Underinvestment, overdevelopment, and regulators with little power to sanction offenders have ensured that our local rivers and ultimately the country's coastal waters have become contaminated to levels not seen for more than 30, 40 years. Since 2016, the Environment Agency's monitoring budget has fallen by 55%, so it relies on an even greater extent on the water company's self-reporting. Court actions against polluters have fallen by 98% between 2002 and 2020. Law enforcement has been dying as quickly as our rivers. So how bad is the problem here in West Berkshire? Well, there's approximately 12 sewage treatment works, and most of them, in fact, all as far as I can see, have had a number of spills in the last year that we've got available, 2020. And ultimately, they range from double figures in terms of number of times, but up to about 4,100 hours of actual discharge for the Hampstead Norris sewage treatment work, which anybody, mathematicians or anybody in the know will say will know that that's approximately half a year. Across the whole district, 1,100 times there's been sewage discharges to a total of 16,500 hours. Therefore, as the petition requests, we would like to a formal explanation as to why our local MPs, why they voted down the Lords Amendment And that would have put greater legal duties on the water companies in England and Wales to make improvements to their sewage systems and demonstrate progressive reductions in the harm caused by discharges of untreated sewage. And in fact, only this week, our Newbury MP, Laura Farris, voted against a requirement that was put forward by the Lib Dems in Parliament, requiring the number of sentient animals killed or injured as a result of polluted rivers that required recording, and the actions of the water companies to guarantee said protections of sentient animals. And that was voted down by the government. And the government has announced this week also that they're scrapping the national target for all rivers to be in good health. There are no plans for new goals for the overall quality of rivers that after the current targets expire in 2027. And this target up to 27 for all rivers in England to be in good health based on wildlife health, chemical levels, and the goal of the Environment Agency, a goal the Environment Agency has previously admitted will not be met. Indeed, new legally binding targets proposed in a consultation on Wednesday showed that a 80% cut in phosphate pollution, water treatment plants, 40% cut by 2037. Those substances are important to manage, but that amendment does not, and that proposal does not address pollution from sewage outflows. As Richard Benwell, the Chief Executive of the Wildlife and Countryside Link, a membership body for conservation groups and NGOs, the targets miss our major sources of pollution from water and sewage companies. They depend on unreliable methods of measurement, and they set no ambition at all for the overall quality of our rivers. That is completely out of step with the demand for healthier rivers. So we as a council are stakeholders. We interact with Thames Water on a regular basis, and indeed the petition requests that we examine and scrutinise their plans and to ensure that the waterways that crisscross our district are clean and healthy, not only for our own enjoyment and for leisure, etc., but for the health of our natural environment. So I ask respectfully that members support the people of West Berkshire and vote in favour of this motion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Council.
Thank you, Councillor Masters. Councillor Doherty, do you wish to?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Masters, for bringing this very important issue to us. I don't think that anyone here tonight will argue that the level of sewage discharge by water companies is acceptable. And no doubt we will hear more from my own group on this following Councillor Steve Arderwater's motion. However, when we discussed this as a group, we agreed we are unable to accept what we feel is a nakedly political petition, which is viewed by members on this side of the room as yet another attempt to attack the Conservatives under the pretence of acting in the best interest of all residents in West Berkshire. Our local MPs are entitled to keep their residents informed in a manner that they choose, not how you demand. And we certainly disagree that this council should be used in such a way. Sir John Redwood actively intervened in the debate that you refer to in your petition and made very clear his position. And I have seen two detailed accounts from Laura Farris, published on the 25th of October and the 8th of November, as to what her position on this matter was. Our MPs did indeed listen to the widespread and shared concerns on this issue. And it was following our MPs' successful lobbying of ministers that improvements were made to the Environment Act prior to it coming into law last November. We are not going to support a campaign of attack by you, which many of us felt was at an unacceptable level of personal attack within your letter of the 11th of November to the Newbury Weekly News, and bullying tactics through your social media trolling of the MPs last October and November. Had you genuinely wanted a cross-party position on this topic, if you were serious about cooperation, you would not have made your petition political, knowing full well that we would not be able to support it. However, I'm in little doubt that this was probably your very intent, so that you can continue your consistent and repetitive narrative about what awful people all we Conservatives are. You chase your headlines, Councillor Masters. Meanwhile, we will continue to work constructively with our partners. Councillor Arderwater has submitted a motion that demonstrates to the people of West Berkshire that we Conservatives are just as concerned about this issue. Everybody wants fish, not faeces. But our approach to dealing with this is very different to yours.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Councillor Brooks, you wish to say a few words?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Well, look, let's get to the actual matter in hand here. There's a lot of public disquiet about this, and rightly so. I live not far from where there was a major leak and a lot of water life killed near me in Lower Way. But that's not an isolated incident, and these incidents seem to be rising. It is perfectly reasonable for this council to ask our MPs to explain themselves. That's not an attack per se. It draws attention to the fact they did vote to defeat the Lord's Amendment, and it is reasonable for this council to write to them and say, would you please explain? So I don't have a problem, my side don't have a problem with this petition. Only in as much as we would advise in future, Councillor Masters, that inviting Thames Water, as they will come, we hope, to OSMC in March 2022, it's perfectly reasonable to expect the OSMC to robustly question them. I'm not sure I would have put it in the petition, because it could lead a commercial organisation to think I'm coming along to a coconut shy. So a little bit of finesse in your wording. We will, I'm sure, if they come, ask them robust questions. So I think it goes without saying and doesn't help the petition at all. However, in closing, 2 of my 6 minutes, we will be supporting this, and we wish those MPs, we shouldn't have to ask them, they should be writing to this council talking about the position on this very important matter. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Culver, would you like to wrap up the debate, please?
Thank you very much, Chairman. This public petition is hardly radical. It simply asks for Thames Water to be scrutinised at OSMC and an explanation from 2 of our MPs why they rejected the Duke of Wellington's amendment to place a new duty on water companies to make improvements to their sewerage systems. Please bear in mind, this is not a Green Party motion. This is a public petition. And if you vote against this public petition this evening, you are rejecting the wishes of more than 1,700 members of the public, including Laura Farris's mother, who signed the petition, I hasten to add. The public will struggle to understand why this petition cannot be supported. It's clearly alerted you to the public concern about this, hence putting in your own motion this evening. I know that you like to cast the Green Party as reds under the bed. Last week, Councillor Law wrote in the Newbury Weekly News, accused us of having extreme socialist colours. This petition could have said renationalise the water companies. It could have said sack the CEOs. It could have said end the bonuses, but it doesn't. It's a very, very straightforward public petition. It could scarcely be more simple. Bring Thames Water to OSMC and scrutinise them, and ask our elected representatives why they didn't take the opportunity to strengthen the Environment Act. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Do I have a proposal?
Yep.
Would you like to state the proposal?
Yep. Sorry, I propose. Yep.
Is that proposal seconded? Right.
Sorry, can I just clarify? Are you proposing that council accept the take the action the petition suggests?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, members. I will now ask Mr. Clark to conduct a formal vote on that proposal. Sorry, I saw no hands, Councillor Brooks. I have to respond to people who are asking to speak.
Thank you. I will now ask members to vote in relation to the proposal that has been made, which is to take the action the petition suggests, and the voting is now appearing on members' screens. Councillor Vickers.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thought I'd done it.
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that that proposal has not been carried.
Thank you. Can I just check whether members have any other petitions they wish to present to the council this evening? Thank you. In which case, we'll move.
I think we will need an alternative proposal, so to reject the petition.
Okay.
So it's. Sorry, I'm just suggesting to the chairman that we will need an alternative proposal. So a proposal has been made and not been carried. So we need an alternative proposal so that we resolve the council has one of three options under the constitution.
Happy to propose an alternative motion, which is to reject the petition.
Thank you. Is that seconded?
Is that seconded?
Yes, seconded.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I will now ask members to indicate their votes using their microphones, which is being displayed now, and this is to not take the action for the reasons put forward in the debate.
Sorry, I'm a little bit confused what we're voting on.
So this is to not take the action detailed in the petition. So the council needs to resolve one of three ways. So a proposal was put that wasn't carried. So we need to have one of the alternative proposals, which has been moved by Councillor Doherty. Councillors Beth and Drummond, Billy, Jeff. Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that that proposal has been carried, which was not to take the action for the reasons put forward in the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Members, we're now going to take the item which was originally labelled 19, which is the motions put forward to the council this evening. I'd like you to consider that the longer we spend on these, then the less time we have to get through the agenda. So I would ask you to be, as before, succinct in what you say and don't repeat points that have been made previously. The motions are set out in page 97 of your agenda pack. It's also my intention to reorder the motions, and the new order is to take first motion B, D, A, C, E, F, and G in that order. So for motion B, can I invite Councillor Steve Ardar-Water to move this motion?
Thank you, Chairman. I so move.
I believe the motion has been seconded by Councillor Richard Sumner.
That's correct, Chairman. Happy to second.
The council will debate the motion this evening in order to facilitate the discharge of business in accordance with Rule Procedure 4.9.8. Can I ask Councillor Ardar-Water now to speak to the motion for up to 5 minutes?
Thank you, Chairman. Building on the debate we've had around the petition, my motion seeks to establish a concrete and useful and constructive way forward to achieve the goal which I believe we all share, which is to have cleaner, better rivers free of sewer discharges. Just one clarification from my side on some of the points that were made around amendments by our MPs. There was not one single amendment to the environment bill, which is now the Environment Act, there were many, many amendments. This piece of legislation is massive. It is still ongoing in terms of its implementation, in that many aspects, for example, around payments to farmers and various other aspects, have still yet to be worked out. It is a work in progress. While it is a major step forward, and that is acknowledged by all parties, including the very reliable and university admired, say, Rivers Trust. It is seen as a major step forward. It is, of course, not perfect. It is vastly better than what we've had before, and it sets the baseline for the water companies working in partnership with ourselves as local authorities and increasingly the nature-based charities, who I'm looking forward to seeing concrete action from, to improve, again, river quality. This situation, this water quality issue has built up over many, many years. The privatized water industry has delivered a huge amount of improvement since the days of denationalization back in the 1980s. However, up until last year, the Environment Act, it was driven by dual imperatives of keeping price rises as moderate as possible for consumers while increasing quality. And again, that has done good stuff. Rivers today, while still unacceptable, are much, much better than they were in the days of the water boards. The challenge, as I think Councillor Masters indicated, was severalfold. We have many more houses, and the level of investment in the water industry has not kept up with population growth. We have intensive farming, which causes fertilizer runoff into rivers, thereby again harming wildlife. So we do need to and expect to and demand significant change of gear from the water companies. I'm glad to see, starting with the Environment Act, there was a much firmer directive set on Ofwat, the regulator, to demand improvements. I'm glad to see that the government has mandated delivery of detailed plans by this September of how improvements are going to happen. And again, I welcome the fact that the OSMC committee has already set in place plans to invite Thames Water to explain their plans further to them. So this will not be fixed overnight, but I'm confident that with the shared level of determination across this council, and again from residents and groups across the district and the country, together with firmer legislation mandating the environment and improvement of the environment on the water companies, that there will be change. It will not be as fast as we want to see. It will be faster than it has been the case, and we will play our part in working with and cajoling and encouraging Thames Water to do their bit faster. So I look forward to progress from them and from our partners, not least in another dimension, our natural solution delivery partners. Again, many of the charities I touched on, as well as local landowners. There is a lot to do, and I look forward to significant improvements over the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ardar-Water. Councillor Sumner, can I just confirm that you wish to reserve your right?
Apologies, Chairman. Yes, I do. Thank you.
Members, I'll now open up the debate. Councillor Jeffrey. I believe, yes, I'm just about to get to it. I believe you wish to propose an amendment to this motion.
I would like to, Mr. Chairman.
Would you like to, you have 5 minutes to set out your amendment.
Right.
Not yet. Wait.
Sorry, I've got 5 minutes to which, Mr. Chairman?
To introduce your amendment.
Chairman, Council, I propose that this council calls on government to go further and resolves the council should respond to the government's consultation on environmental targets to suggest, where appropriate, meaningful targets and deadlines to meet them, are set to require water companies to end these discharges, a tax on water companies to be levied to enable the funding of the Environment Agency to adequately monitor water companies' discharges and other clean-up measures, reduce the number of licenses granted for discharge into rivers, strengthen Ofwat's powers to hold companies accountable, and require local environmental groups to be given places on company boards. That is my proposed amendment.
Thank you. I understand that the motion is being seconded by Councillor Alan Macro.
Yes, and I reserve my right.
Sorry, apparently under amendments, you cannot reserve your right to speak on an amended motion. So either speak now or during the debate.
I'll speak now in that case. Yes, as Councillor Jeffries has mentioned, really, we need more teeth. Back in 2018, the Environment Agency and the water companies formed a framework to identify the problem. They identified 700 problem overflows, of which 110 were overflowing 110 times a year, which is over twice a week. That was in 2018. To date, none of those have been fixed. They're still leaking up to 110 times a year. The other big issue I'd like to mention is the fact that the Environment Agency, as was alluded to in the petition debate, is seriously underfunded. And back in 2010, they had a budget of 120 million to carry out their regulatory authorities. That was reduced year on year. Last year, it was only 43 million. So it's almost a 2/3 reduction. And they just do not have the resources to investigate these problems, as we've seen locally with the River Lambourne. So we do need to find another source of funding for the Environment Agency for them to carry out their work. The water companies do rely on the Environment Agency, so they should pay. And finally, I'd like to point out also, remind members, that one water company has recently been fined millions and millions of pounds because they were discharging sewage into the sea in this case, not because of storm overflows, but because it was cheaper than treating it. And there's a strong suspicion that other water companies are doing the same. We need to give the Environment Agency the teeth to deal with this and to deal with it quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Marsh who wishes to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to speak in support of the amendment. I think Councillor Walter's motion does need some serious toughening up, which this does. In September 2021, a report called Troubled Waters was produced by a partnership of environmentalist charities, including the National Trust, the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, and the Wildlife Trust, Hardly Climate Extremists. It found that our fragile freshwater habitats are being devastated by agricultural waste, pollution and raw sewage. Just 14% of rivers in England meet the standard of good ecological status, and species such as otters, salmon and the swallowtail butterfly, Britain's largest, are among those threatened by this environmental catastrophe. So urgent action needs to be taken. Their report called for more funding, as we've just heard from Councillor Macro, for monitoring and enforcing environmental regulations, urgent measures to reduce pesticide and excess fertilizer use in farming, and a complete ban on allowing raw sewage to enter our rivers, not over 25 years, but now. The government allows water companies to discharge sewage into rivers at any time if there is a lack of chemicals to treat it or in emergencies, normally at times of heavy rain, which of course are more frequent now thanks to climate change. But emergencies on those occasions, there were 400,000 such occasions during 2020, and that's on the water companies' figures because the government allows them to mark their own homework. The true figures probably likely to be higher. And these overflows, diluted only by rainwater, can contain anything that goes down the drain, from human waste to household chemicals and plastics. The government wants taxpayers rather than the water companies to foot the bill for improvements to the sewage system, despite their enormous profits since they were privatised or denationalised, as Councillor Arda Walter puts it. This was our water. It still is our water, whether or not it's been privatised, and we want to see action now. We've heard about the amendment to the Environment Bill. There was a rebellion in the House. There were 22 MPs who thought they should support the Duke of Wellington, another man who's probably not a climate extremist, his amendment. And then the government got away with watering it down. You have to ask, who on earth would vote against this sentence to take all reasonable steps to ensure untreated sewage is not discharged from court storm overflows? And I'm sorry if Councillor Doherty thinks we're being political again, but you have to ask why that clause was removed from the legislation. I can assure you that everyone we've spoken to, all those people who signed this petition, are absolutely horrified by this. They find it almost unbelievable that companies whose chief responsibility is to maintain and supply clean water should actually be pumping raw sewage into it, and the government is letting them get away with it. So this council can do something to address that by saying we're not accepting that anymore. I think that Councillor Arda Walter's motion needs toughening up, as I say, which this amendment does. Just a reminder, finally, although the petition sadly was rejected, the last time a Green Party petition was, the Green Party presented a petition to this council in 2019 on climate change, we had been told for years beforehand, no, we're going to follow the government guidelines 2050 for zero carbon. And lo and behold, within a matter of months, we'd gone to 2030 as we had been calling for, political or not. So the council was more ambitious than the government. Let's see the council being more ambitious than the government in this area and really holding the water companies to account and really pressing to get this problem tackled sooner rather than later. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Arsh. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I'm not against privatisation altogether, but when we're dealing with water, which is a natural resource, you've got, like you have with the land motion that's later on in the agenda, you've got a natural monopoly. So our philosophy in our party is that markets where possible, but state where necessary. And when you've got a natural monopoly, the state does need a much firmer hand on those resources in the interests of the public and indeed of the planet. So I think, you know, where you've got a motion, as we are talking about here, which is just talking about welcoming this, welcoming that, welcoming the other, and is basically doing nothing, taking no action, apart from, thankfully, bringing Thames Water, and of course they don't have to come to OSMC. This is why we felt that there needed to be more. And I'm very grateful to our monitoring officer for drawing my attention, because I drafted this motion before the statement by the government yesterday that it was consulting on measures. So the wording does now bring it back into this council, asking us in the motion to respond in a very strong way with very specific things, which I think will help us to hold the water companies to account and to give more funding so that they can do the action, and particularly that the monitoring of what they do is carried out. In my own ward and in the town I live in, Newbury, we know there are sewage coming out in Station Road, you know, right in front of train travellers. We know we've inherited, and, you know, we can't help it, a lot of combined sewage going through the town. When I started my career in the building industry, this was still quite common, and we were, you know, trying to work to new regulations which separated foul and surface. We've got a huge backlog of work to be done in the sewage industry, but we do need to get on with it. Wildlife won't wait. Species will die forever. And that's why we put this motion out. So I think we should be following, you know, I lived for many years in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is seen as an example of, you know, the market economy working. Well, Hong Kong owns all its land, it owns all the companies, it runs them as government-owned companies. And that's the way we in this party would have done the water industry way back. But we are where we are, and we've just got to be stronger in monitoring them and taking action and in making sure they put the public first and the shareholders next, which is difficult, I know, when you're a private company. But there we are. And some of these companies are now owned by foreign governments, ironically, so we're in a very strange situation, but we have to deal with what we have. And I would hope that we can get all members alongside this, just to give a bit of a push to the government to set targets and to get more funding to the Environment Agency, which can't even bring itself, because it hasn't got the resources, to attend the flood forum on the River Lambourne, I'm told, by people who are on that forum. And I'm just hoping they will come along to the Newbury one when we set this up. So thank you, Chairman. Please support this amendment. It's not attacking the government of the day, because these things were done a long time ago. But I think we've learnt that there were mistakes in the way this particular nationalisation was done. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm informed that water companies discharged raw sewage into waterways 400,000 times in 2020, amounting to more than 3 million hours of discharges. The longest discharges lasted more than 8,000 hours. As Councillor Marsh mentioned, I'll repeat, just 14% of UK's waterways are in a good ecological condition, and more than half of England's rivers fail to pass cleanliness tests. And yet, water companies made £2.2 billion profits in 2020. Now, it's not the first time that the administration has put down a motion that does nothing. Nothing. And I don't understand why you even brought it. Councils are not here to consider something and welcome it 3 times. We welcome this, we welcome that, we welcome the other. Where's the meat? Where's the action? Where's the call to arms, which is what our amendment does? And frankly, if you want to bring asinine motions in, don't waste our time. So the amendment turns around and says, let's get some meaningful targets. Let's press them, lobby them to set meaningful targets. Let's press for a tax on water companies to be levied to undo the damage they're doing or mitigate it. Let's reduce the number of licenses. Take real action. We are calling for this. And strengthen Ofwat's powers and require local environmental groups to be given places on company boards. Yes, this sounds quite radical. It's certainly a lot more radical than welcoming. Where is your motion saying to go further than what the government is doing in light of some of the information I have just read out and Councillor Marsh referred to? It's just a waste of time to bring a motion that perhaps you felt you had to, in light of the petition, to say we welcome everything that's being done. It means nothing. You're here to do things. You're here to urge government. You're here to lobby government. And this council is here to resolve things. And that's why this amendment helps your motion, Councillor Ardagh-Walter, so much. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Well, Councillor Brooks talks about motions which are a waste of time. I mean, I'm old enough to remember several motions on Brexit being brought by the party opposite towards the end of 2019, which were firmly in the pointless camp, but there we go. No, I don't think, well, I certainly can't accept this amendment. Oh, it did happen, honestly, check the minutes. We can't accept this amendment for a couple of reasons. Now, I don't think this is, you mentioned that it's not a political amendment, it's not going to pop at the government, and I think I would concede that. It's certainly a much more sort of sensible amendment than the wording in the petition that we just had to have a look at. But there's a couple of things seriously wrong with it. I mean, what you're going to hear tonight, I'm quite sure, is that our water system, our infrastructure is in dire need of investment. Okay? Absolute dire need of it. And I wouldn't necessarily, well, I wouldn't dispute that at all. You're not going to get that investment from water companies by clobbering them with a tax. That is just economic illiteracy, I'm afraid. How are we going to get the investment required in our infrastructure if we're taxing water companies at the very point where we need that investment to be put into it? I'm afraid that one just cannot wash. In terms of Ofwat's powers, Councillor Vickers, you're quite right, there is a natural monopoly, and that's why we need a regulator. Whenever you do that, obviously the regulator ensures that there's no price gouging. So Ofwat sets 5-year limits on prices, and it also regulates the behaviour of water companies. Thanks to a campaign from our MPs, who includes our Newbury MP, in fact, Laura Paris, the new statutory policy statement that Ofwat have has got very strict wording in there. And that's even been supported by the Angling Trust, who are not a body that have been universally supportive of certainly of the water companies. So that's already there. We can't accept the tax on water companies. That is just completely counterproductive, as we said. And it is worth noting, I think, meaningful targets and deadlines in the Environment Act as it stands. There is a statutory duty on water companies to come up with a plan on how it's going to fix the problem of storm discharges. Those plans will include meaningful targets and deadlines. Finally, on local environmental groups being put on company boards, I'm afraid we are not going to agree to that tonight with such little notice in terms of what's a fundamental change to UK corporate governance. Councillor Brooks, you mentioned that it was radical. Well, you can certainly agree with that. And I certainly can't accept the amendment for the reasons specified. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Masters.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to briefly speak in favour of this amendment. I welcome the amendment from Councillor Jeffrey and the contributions made by the members of the opposition parties. I'm going to keep it fairly brief. I've been accused of being political. Are we not in a political environment? This is not the WI, as much as many people would like. And I'm going to be overtly political. We wonder why the rivers and things are in the state they are, and there's been very little action. And contrary to the wishful thinking and the if, buts and maybes that, we hope that this will happen, the targets that Councillor McKinnon just mentioned, and the pathway, that could just mean an ongoing reduction of 1 bucket of sewage less each year. It is not stringent enough. And I'll just say, follow the money. It's no coincidence, that lobby groups for the water companies, make donations to political parties. And indeed, our former MP, now Lord Benyon, sat on the chair of the Association of Water Companies. I'm sure it's the view that's shared by many of the members opposite, but it defies reality to, when he wrote in November 2017 that water privatisation has been a triumph and we need to say so. It has not been a triumph by any measure, and it's fantasy for the members opposite to say so. The reason that there's no statutory levels and real targets being set is because it's not in the interests of Conservative Party supporters and donors, and that's pure and simple. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Wollaston.
Thank you, Chairman. A very brief point of information for Councillor Vickers. As Chairman of the Lambourne Forum, I can assure you that the Environment Agency and indeed Thames Water attended every single meeting in the 3 years I've chaired it.
Thank you. Councillor Barnett.
Thank you, Chairman. Although technically speaking to the amendment, I wish to make a slight extra little bit of information for members, and it relates specifically to active waste transfer in relationship to sewage transfer. Greater pressure over the last few years has been put on all the old sewage system, especially some of these Victorian systems. And in the ward that I'm one of the members, Greenham, we've obviously got 2 or 3 substations. And this has been obviously exacerbated of late because of further developments. And these developments just cannot take or cannot be really accommodated in the existing sewerage system. And what's resulted technically is that these substations have had to tanker the waste away from the substations. And when this happens, it happens at a period of time when the Thames Water have to get a series of tankers transporting the waste in the middle of the night, flashing lights, sirens going, and completely affecting the quality of life of residents. Not only that, they have to put up with the excessive smells, sometimes backfills of their toilets, and totally sometimes unusable facilities. And furthermore, you know, the sewerage which is being transported doesn't always come directly from the waste storage tanks. It's quite often leaking into the waste into the gutters and obviously the soakaways. So there's a series of issues that do need to be addressed. And I feel we as councillors also need to play an important role when we're looking at some of these future planning applications, because clearly the sewerage system in a lot of the urban areas just cannot take more development.
Thank you. Councillor Count, can I encourage you to be very succinct, please? We need to wrap this up.
I will, Chair. Thank you. What I really just wanted to say is that I've encountered many instances of these types of recommendations before, and the difficulty with it is it's trying to design central government policy on the hoof and locally, and that's something which is beyond our remit. And I think Councillor Harder-Walter's motion nicely covers the fact that we recognise there's a big local impact to this thing, and also that we would intend, I guess, to work with Thames Water to ameliorate it. So, you know, I feel that we need to concentrate on things we can influence rather than trying to frame central government policy on the hoof and locally.
Thank you. Councillor Patton, the same comment to you, please. Please be very succinct.
I'll be brief. Thank you. With greatest respect, Councillor Kent, I don't think this motion, these amendments are trying to influence government policy. What they are trying to do is to encourage this council to hold the government to account. And without them, with this motion as it's presented, that's not going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further hands, so I will return to Councillor Owen Jeffrey as the mover of the amendments to sum up, please.
Thank you. Please forgive me. I thought you'd forgotten me. Right. The amendment I'm proposing seeks to put some of the sad history of privatisation behind us. We've got the opportunity tonight to take Steve Harder-Walter's motion and to turn it into a very useful forward-moving motion. Every one of our 43 councillors either lives, works or has direct links with West Berkshire. Is there even one of the 43 of us who desire to see sewage, yes, council, sewage dumped into our chalk streams, our bigger water courses, and ultimately to old Father Thames himself? Many members have actually put some of the facts, and I'll just reiterate a couple of them. It's expected that government targets of 75% of rivers and streams to be in good condition by 2027, that's just 5 years away, will fail to be met. Currently, no English surface waterway is deemed to be in good overall condition. You've already heard that we've got 400,000 separate incidents in 2020, 3 million hours of sewage discharges, and water companies making £2.2 billion in profit. I think I can reassure Councillor McKinnon that the privatised water companies will not be bankrupted by having one environmental one environmentalist on their board, nor by being obliged to stop discharging sewage into public watercourses. That is the road that has no impetus, no ambition behind it, and that is what we want to put into the original motion, which I'd then personally be very happy to support if you would take this proposal that I've made and support it as an amendment. We're hearing that we mustn't make central government policy here in West Berkshire, but in West Berkshire we can send a message to central government that will be heard. We have some of the loveliest chalk streams anywhere in the country, and we must not be throwing them away because the water companies are going to be allowed to make billions in profits. I don't want to make it party political. It doesn't need to be party political. I can remember when I was on Newbury District Council in the 1980s, a Tory councillor making the proposal that we had to do something about discharges from aerosols to prevent a disaster with the ozone layer going. 50 years on, 40 years on, we are actually seeing the successful results that the ozone issue that was so dreadful in the 80s is now hopefully largely under control. If we start to do something constructive and put some effort into it, actually, Council, we can achieve something. Let's have meaningful targets, meaningful deadlines, a tax on water companies to enable Environment Agency funding to be able to monitor exactly what's going on with water company discharges. Reduce the number of licenses for discharging in the first place, strengthen Ofwat, give it some power to control what's going on. Really, I do ask the whole of Council to come behind this amendment. It is not meant to be a party political amendment. It's meant to be a way forward for us in West Berkshire and a way forward. Let's be a beacon council, a way forward for the country. And I urge councillors of all three parties that are here to support this amendment. Then I am sure that we'll be able to support the amended proposal. Intelligent, moderate, but potentially so valuable. Please, I ask you to support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Ardile-Walter, as the mover of the original motion, do you wish to make a comment on the amendment?
Thank you, Chairman. And again, I welcome the comments that have been raised in this amendment debate. I have to say, I do agree with many of the points that Councillor Jeffries has raised here. But only many, not all. And in particular, the ones I agree with are already in both my original motion and are subjects of action by the government. And while Councillor Brooks and colleagues may wish to call upon and exhort and cajole central government from here, I do feel, and I'd point members to paragraphs 3 and 4 of my amendment, where a statutory plan to reduce discharges and a report setting out actions that would be needed is mandated by law. So much of what is asked for in the first part is actually in place already. Again, that is agreeable, and if that would persuade, if a partial amendment to amendment, which I'd hate us to get into, would meet Councillor Jeffrey's enthusiasm, then I'm very happy with the first bullet point. Again, I cannot agree with the taxing companies or putting groups on boards. I noted a lot of comments aimed at the tired old target of profits, as if a private company is bad and the water board was great all those years ago. And candidly, members, even those who are slightly older than I remember the water boards. They were shockers. They were dreadful. Privatization of nationalised utilities has been a great step forward for the country. It has not gone far enough. And as I said in my original motion, we welcome the change of stance initially from government, and we look forward to it being followed through by the water industry, by ourselves and partners in raising standards further. So it has gone far, it needs to go further. So I'm happy with part of this. I cannot accept it all. One final point again is that and again, I do agree with Councillor Jeffrey that both Ofwat's powers do need to be strengthened and the Environment Agency does need to have resources. I would be very happy at a separate hearing or with a separate motion to take that point further and work collaboratively to do exactly that. Both those points are very valid, but again, I cannot accept this entire amendment as is. I would be happy with items or bullet points 1 and 3 and 4, if that would be a reasonable compromise. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, members. Councillor Jeffries, you've made your concluding statement, I'm afraid.
I have, but done.
I'd now therefore ask, that concludes the debate. I'll ask Sarah to conduct a vote on the amended motion, please, members.
Thank you. This is Chairman, a motion or amendment may be a minor alteration to a motion or amendment can be made with the consent of the proposer and seconder and with the consent of council. And the council's consent would be sought by you. I think the matter is for you to rule on, Chairman.
Sorry, with social distancing, I can't communicate with my members.
Right, I think I detect, although this is an unusual situation, that both sides are willing to take part of the amendment to the original motion. Can we be clear which parts we are agreeing to take?
That was going to be my precise question, Mr. Chairman.
I think I heard 1, 3 and 4 of the bullet points.
Chairman, yeah. I'm asking the clerk to the meeting to put it on the screen so that members can be absolutely clear about what is acceptable and what may be amended.
That's not the right one.
No, it's the wrong slide.
We had the slide that was up before, Vicky, please. Thank you. So can I have a proposal, please, for...
I think because I think it needs to formally come from the proposer of the amendment. So I think if Councillor Ardagh-Walter can indicate which bullet points were acceptable.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. So I would be happy of an amended amendment which included the first bullet points: meaningful targets and deadlines to meet them are set to require water companies to end these discharges. And the third point, to reduce the number of licenses granted for discharge into rivers. And the fourth point, to strengthen Ofwat's powers to hold companies accountable.
Councillor Jeffries, are you willing to...
Mr. Chairman,
accept that?
If we can have the whole council go that way, then we'll accept taking two of I will accept taking two of the proposals out and going with what Councillor Ardagh-Walter has suggested with proposals 1, 2 and 4 being agreed by 1, 2 and 3.
Okay.
1, 2 and 3.
Right. So members, we now have an amendment to the original substantive motion comprising items 1, 3 and 4 on the slide in front of you. Can we put that to the vote, please, Mrs. Clark?
Apologies. I'll ask the clerk to the meeting to take down the proposed amendment, and I'll ask the Zoom host to now display the vote. And so members will shortly see the vote on their microphones, and I'll ask them to vote in respect of the amended or minorly amended amendment.
Councillor Jeffrey.
I just wanted to make the remark that I was living in hope that we would get to an agreed position, and I am delighted that we've managed to do that, even if it's not everything that we wanted, and it might be a little bit more than they wanted. We've got a common council position.
Good. I'm pleased too. Would you like to register your delight by voting? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that the the proposed amendment with the minor alterations has been carried.
Major alterations.
Could you advise me now how we stand on the substantive motion, which has now been amended?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So we now return to the debate on the amended motion. So we in effect go back to that yes, members may now wish to comment and engage in debate on the updated amended
Fine.
motion.
Thank you. Right, so I'll open the debate now on the substantive motion. I'll see Councillor Brooks has it.
Thank you, Chairman. I will say to Councillor Jeffrey, I think I heard somebody over there say, don't get used to this sort of thing. All right. However, let us be quite clear. I think this does strengthen the motion considerably into a call for action. And that's all I'm looking for in motions. It's saying, we welcome this, but we'd urge you to do this. There's a sense of positive action rather than just receiving some information and welcoming it. On this side, we will still in the future press for a tax on water companies. They're doing a lot of damage and they should be paying to mitigate that. I'm not as scared of representation on boards, Councillor McKinnon, as you are. And you're in the dogma of the far right in that. But you and I will probably agree that one person on a board don't make a lot of difference, but at least it is another voice against, a sort of commercial body that can be hell-bent on profits only. But I'm also going to agree in terms of, and my own side will thump me for this, the man from the ministry or the man from the water board all those years ago just wasn't that efficient. That is a problem. But of course, once you introduce privatisation, if profit is the major motive, then you lose quality of service and delivery. Or you can. It's a danger. It's a risk. It's a risk. And so for that, those 2 points that you've deleted from an amendment don't mean we don't have passion for those, but we are very aware and acknowledge that you have taken on board some of these things. We thank you for that. And I think it's always good. No, not that far right, sir. No. I beg your pardon. I will withdraw that, Ross, and talk to you about how right you are over a pint of, over a glass of wine sometime. So we thank you for that. And I hope we'll do it more often. Because actually, on both sides, we're trying to do some good things. And we've got into, for years, we're very, very tribal. And yet, frankly, this is very encouraging, which is why you probably won't want to do it again. But it's very encouraging that we can actually come up with a common position or accept down the law. Thank you.
Councillor Cole, swiftly moving on.
Thank you, Chairman. As far as Thames Water is concerned, I do much look forward to seeing them at OSMC. I believe it's now expected to be in September, not this month. The motion mentions the Pang, and the Pang's certainly not the only river of interest. To quote Newbury Today and Fergal Sharkey about the Lambourne. Only 16 miles long, yet in 2019, Thames Water spent 601 hours dumping sewage into it. There's an interesting article on Penny Post just today, much of which is a comparison of what Thames Water say they're going to do against what they actually do. There is a useful observation that we can all of us do our bit by taking a little bit more care of what goes down the sewers. On a slightly sarky comment on our motions tonight, how much effect these motions will have is debatable. Though it's right that council should have their say. It's nice of the writer to allow us the latter, but I hope that we do prove him incorrect on the former by holding Thames Water to account at OSMC.
Thank you. Councillors, I see some more hands rising. We have discussed this for a long, long time now, so can I, again, I'll press you to be succinct in your comments.
Chairman, if I may, I'm conscious of time this evening and the amount of important motions to get through. I think we've had a really good debate, so I'm happy to call for this motion to be put at this moment in time, because I think everybody has had a chance to join the debate this evening. Does that find a seconder?
Thank you, Chairman. If the closure motion has been proposed and seconded, if you are satisfied that the matter has been sufficiently debated, then you can now put that proposal for a closure motion to the vote. If that is carried, we will move immediately to the closing order of debate on the substantive amended motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Doherty. That has been seconded. I think we have discussed this for a very long time, and we do have a lot of business still to conduct on this this business. So I will therefore put the closure motion to the vote. If I may.
A quick point of clarification, Chairman. All I wanted to say was I think we've arrived at a...
I'm sorry, this isn't a point of clarification. This is continuing the debate.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I will now ask the Zoom host to put up a vote, and this is, I will ask members to indicate whether they are content for the question to now be put. Councillors Wollaston and Jeffrey. Okay. We can accept Councillor Jeffrey's vote from the floor that the motion has in effect been carried in any event because there are 30 members accepting this proposal. Thank you. Thank you. Chairman, the closure motion has been carried, so we now move to the closing order of debate.
Right, we move to the closing order of debate on this substantive motion. Councillor Sumner, you now wish to speak.
Happy to second, Chairman. Simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ardar-Water.
No further comments, Chairman.
In which case I will ask Mr. Clark to conduct a formal vote regarding the substantive motion.
Thank you, members. The Zoom host will shortly display a further vote on your microphones, and this is for the in favour or against or abstaining in relation to the substantive amended motion. I think Councillor Mays, I think again, thank you. Chairman, I can confirm that the amended substantive motion has been carried.
Thank you very much indeed. Can we invite the councillors who are absent to return? We'll see how this one goes. Welcome back, members who are absent. Motion D will not be debated as that was covered by our petition debate earlier. So we move on to motion A, Ukraine. Can I invite Councillor Lynn Doherty to move this motion, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to move the motion before you.
I understand this motion is being seconded by Councillor Brooks. Thank you. The Council will debate the motion this evening in order to facilitate the discharge of business in accordance with Procedure Rule 4.9.8. Can I ask Councillor Doherty to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Chairman. Members, Russia's appalling assault on the Ukraine is an unprovoked, premeditated attack against a sovereign democratic state, and we should be united in its condemnation and relentless in our commitment to support Ukraine through this dark hour. I am sure, like me, you are all watching daily the horrors unfolding before us in Ukraine. We are seeing the unimaginable, maternity hospitals being bombed, individual stories of loss of loved ones, people being forced underground to shelter, humanitarian corridors collapsing, and desperate attempts to flee. As we watch, I am also sure each and every one of us is asking ourselves, what can we do to help? The community of West Berkshire is united in this desire to help, and the motion I bring before you this evening is designed to enable West Berkshire Council to help facilitate this. We have already this week agreed to set up a Ukraine support hub here in West Berkshire. And this morning, I met with our partners, Greenham Common Trust and the Volunteer Centre West Berkshire, to discuss how we can collectively support the response here in our district. We want to encourage people able to give financial assistance to do so in the first instance through the channels that we know are going directly to those most in need and that attract a degree of match funding, the Disasters Emergency Committee and the Red Cross. However, we also recognise that many local charities will take a supporting role in the days to come. So alongside the Volunteer Centre West Berkshire, we will be looking at how best to coordinate any response to potential needs. To assist with this, I'm delighted that today we agreed to work with Greenham Trust on funding this. Both parties are committing up to £25,000 each of match funding to an appeal that is about to go live on the Greenham Trust platform. We have set up a council webpage to update all on information and guidance as it becomes available. We will welcome Ukraine refugees and actively take part in the schemes that are open to us. To date, this is both the Ukraine Family Scheme and the Homes for Ukraine scheme. We are already seeing an exceptional response across the country to people offering their homes to the people of Ukraine, 138,000 as of last night. The council will be central in helping families settle into their communities and access public services, including schools, public health and other support, such as access to trauma counselling. The council is also responsible for ensuring that the homes are welcome, that the homes that welcome refugees are fit for purpose. I am sure, like me, all members here this evening will welcome this active role for the council, and I therefore put this motion before you this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Burke, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right? Oh, sorry.
I'll speak now, if I may, Chairman. We welcome this motion. It has a call to arms in as much as encouraging residents that wish to offer financial assistance do so by donating to DEC or the British Red Cross. We welcome Ukraine refugees. The things we're doing, entirely appropriate. Anything we can do to help, we'd like some cross-party involvement. What a strange world we're suddenly living in, after coming through a strange world for 2 years of the pandemic. There aren't that many people who might be some in this chamber who remember living under the fear of nuclear obliteration. And we were lulled in the West into some sort of sense of false security that the Russian bear had become cuddly. And now we know it is a pariah state and was merely resting and hibernating. People now have to get used to a new world. We have a new Cold War amongst us. It will mean some hardships. It will mean some hardships. It will mean that fuel will go up further than it perhaps would have done. I am pleased personally with the response of the Western nations. It's a little bit late, and there was far too much dependency put on their energy security with a maverick state that was just lying low and now is causing not only a humanitarian disaster, but acting in the manner of nations in the 30s. More than one, there was Italy, there was as well as Germany. The manner of nations in the 30s, that's where we've gone back to. And the world won't be the same. Won't be the same now. Young people will realize that it's a dangerous place. I pray that we don't go back to that sense of 4-minute warning that we will all be killed. But we're not far away from that type of threat. So thank you, Leader of Council, for bringing this motion. And we totally endorse it. And as I say, any help we can give in some cross-party, working party or anything like that, we'd be very pleased to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brooks. Members, I'll now open up the debate. Councillor Masters, I believe you wish to propose an amendment to this motion.
Yes, Chairman. It's a very simple motion, amendment to the motion, and it's just that West Berkshire Council, in their conversations with the national government, urged them to ease the visa requirements to ensure that the refugees who need to get here can get here as quickly as can be expedited. And as we've seen in the last couple of weeks, it's been somewhat hampered by bureaucracy. And this is the time for losing that bureaucracy.
Councillor Carver, I gather you wish to
Yes,
second?
I'll second, Chairman, reserve my rights. Thank
You
you.
reserve your rights. Okay, thank you. Can I invite members who are wishing to speak on the amendment to indicate now, please? Councillor Burke. Your hand is raised. Okay, could you lower your hand for the time being then? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. I had really hoped this evening that we would pass a motion that we were all united on. We are in disagreement around your waiving of visas. Quite simply, we know that the countries that border with Ukraine have done exactly what they need to do, which is open those borders to refugees in imminent danger. Once they are in those countries, we have the opportunity to look at how we bring people across here. The majority that we're seeing have biometric passports, and therefore they don't actually need to apply for a visa, and those without can now apply online. I can entirely agree with Councillor Jeff Brooks. I think the response to start with was slow. However, I have seen increased action and activity over the last few days. And I think it's like everything, when you're dealing with a situation, you're trying to get up and running. And actually, when I hear tonight that 6,100 visas have already been granted, I don't think there's a requirement to waive visas. So I won't be supporting the amendment to my motion. And I really hope that we can move to the main amendment so that we can actually stand united as a council on something.
Councillor Brooks.
Chairman, this motion was about this council doing something to help refugees come to our district. And I was very pleased to support it and second it. by introducing this amendment, which I believe was given to the officers some days ago, and now we've had it with minutes of prior notice. My group has not been able to consider it. But it does introduce to an important motion a political edge. And that's why I will urge my own members to abstain, but I will not whip them. We don't do that sort of thing, much as they might enjoy it. In terms of their own personal position, I just think we've now introduced a bit of a political argument into what was an important motion for this council. Now, having said that, it's quite clear that the government needs to do better in terms of processing visas. No question about it. I think that's bureaucratic treacle again. I think that's the Home Office not being able to adapt their procedures to act with proper speed. But I don't believe it adds anything to this motion. I won't be supporting it myself. My members will have had a steer, but they are very independently minded people, and I'm happy for which way they want to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brushman.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Brooks, for those words, because I entirely agree with them. And the point I would make very briefly is that we know that there have already been false applications for visas across the channel seeking to come into the country as Ukrainians when they're not Ukrainians. If we start raising visa requirements, I simply think that will be a problem we have to face, we'll have to deal with. I think I certainly entirely agree with Councillor Brooks. We need to speed the process up. We need to make it slicker, but that's not waiving it. I think we need a better system, but not to waive the visa system. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Pickers.
Just briefly, I mean, I actually agree with the amendment, but I'm not going to vote for it because I think we are where we are. There is a certain knee-jerk attitude, I think, amongst members of this government that we must have visas. When you're looking at, these are women and children and old people who are no danger to anybody. They're coming straight from the most dreadful war. I don't think anything that we've seen with the refugee crisis that we've been experiencing in recent years compares with this. But we are where we are. And I think the fact that the systems are set up to stop people coming, I mean, I've got family members who've been through, I think, disgraceful behaviour by immigration authority. There is a mentality in the department which I think is horrible, but we are where we are, and our role in this district is to welcome those that can manage to get here. So I'm not going to be supporting the Green Amendment, but actually it is our party's policy that we should have been able to waive visa requirements, but there we are.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Councillor Hilary Cole, do you wish, as the executive member, do you wish to say anything on this amendment?
I have nothing to say on the amendment other than I can't support it, and I support the substantive. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Masters.
I think it's Councillor Culver to close as seconder, Chairman. I did my brief intro. But if I may add that I fully support the motion, but I just feel that we need to speed up this process through waiving. So that was why.
Councillor Culver.
Thank you, Chairman. I also very much welcome this motion, and particularly what the leader said about encouraging people to give money to the DEC, because I have heard reports that things are being taken to the border and dumped and not being given to the people who need them. So I absolutely support what you're saying this evening. So I don't want us to be misinterpreted in that regard. It does annoy me a bit when people say we're introducing politics. This is a political chamber. As Councillor Masters said earlier, this is not the Women's Institute. We should be able to have political debates, and we can disagree with each other. But casting, aspersions around about we shouldn't be political, I just think is a bit mindless, really. With regard to the visas, as we know from the media, from reports that we've seen, it's causing a great amount of confusion. People are coming to Calais. They were told there'd be a centre there to help them. Then they were told to go to Lille, and it turned out there wasn't a centre there either. and people are going back to Poland to try and sort things out there. Why are we making it so difficult in this country compared to other countries around Europe who are being so much more welcoming? So that's our concern. We know with COVID that very many people in the population signed up to help, and they weren't given tasks to do. So, you know, we want to give people things that they can do. And my concern is with this, that many well-meaning people are going to sign up for this scheme, but are not going to be paired up with somebody because they don't have the name. And in recent days, I've had many conversations with people who say, I want to bring someone over here and help someone, but I go onto the form and it says, who do you want to sponsor? And they don't have a name and they don't know who to go to get a name. So we're making it overly complex. So this is why we think we should drop the visa in this instance. Thank you.
Councillor Doherty is the mover of the original motion.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for your thoughts on that. I think that the interesting one is we don't disagree that the speeding up the process is critical here. We have seen increased capacity and deployment of extra staff to visa application centres. We have seen pop-up centres, visa application centres opening near the borders. So I think the increased capacity is there. It got off to a slow start, and I'm with everybody in saying that. But for me, the real key issue here is I do think visas need to be in place, and I'm pleased to see that, as I said, 6,100 since that process has started on this, I think is a good place to be. So I'm not supporting the amendment, and I hope we can move to the substantive item.
Thank you. Members, that concludes the debate on the amendment. Can I ask Sarah to conduct the vote on the amendment, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I will ask the Zoom host now to display the votes for the proposed amendment on members' screens, and if members could indicate how they wish to vote using their microphones. Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that that proposed amendment has not been carried.
Thank you. Then members will return to the substantive motion. Does any member wish to speak on this substantive motion before we draw that to a close? Councillor Linden.
Thank you, Chairman. I fully support and welcome the Leader of the Council's motion. I also fully support what Councillor Brooks has also said. I think the barbaric attack, particularly on civilians, Ukrainian citizens, has been disgraceful, as well as other overseas people in the media. And I think the Russians need to leave Ukrainian territory. I really welcome what the council is doing. But as Councillor Brooks has alluded and said, we also need to see this as a wake-up call. And I think we've seen, and we need to follow as a country, Germany's defence spending increases, as well as the French president this evening saying the same thing. We need to not only have a nuclear deterrence, but we also need to have a conventional deterrence to stop a potential World War III, and I don't want that to happen. And we do need to spend extra money on defence. I know we have a lot of spending requirements, but we do need to, and I will follow the views of many MPs from a variety of parties, including Conservatives and Labour, and I suspect some Liberal Democrats as well, that we do need to spend. Obviously, there's going to be limitations on what we can spend, but we do have some of our equipment which does need to be improved, like the Type 31 frigates programme, which we're now starting on.
Councillor Linden, can you concentrate on this?
Yeah, but I think that this is an important thing to consider, Chairman. And again, I would like to say, as part of the added, that I fully support this proposal, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, here in West Berkshire, we have a record of supporting refugees and asylum seekers. In recent years, we have taken into our communities people from Syria and Afghanistan who needed our help. Many unaccompanied asylum-seeking children have made their way here after leaving family and friends in their home countries. We have made all these people welcome in their time of need, and many have settled here and are playing a full part in our society. I'm going to support this motion, and if members follow suit, we will be welcoming people fleeing from the terror and cruelty of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. They will be safe here, and I know that we will look after them well. Recently, officials from the Home Office and the Southeast Strategic Partnership for Migration said that our response and welcome to asylum-seeking children and Syrian and Afghan refugees has been exceptional. Only today, I heard an Ofsted inspector say that unaccompanied asylum-seeking children arriving here in West Berkshire are treated with kindness. Already, we have 2 Ukrainian children being taught in one of our primary schools, having fled here from the terror. We have the capacity to treat Ukrainian refugees with the same care and compassion, and I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Masters.
Thank you, Chairman. As I said previously, I welcome this motion. I just felt that it needed a little bit of a small amendment, and I thank the members of this chamber who voted for that. And yeah, it's absolutely a terrible situation, and we need to be as welcoming as we can. And I urge the council to reach out to all the refugee groups and other charities that are involved, and I welcome the participation of the Green and Common Trust. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Hilary Cole, do you wish to speak any further on this substantive motion?
No, thank you, Chairman. I'm conscious of time, and there are other motions to debate, so I'm happy with what's been said. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty.
No, I'd just like to thank members for their support. And just to reiterate to members, this is a fast-moving situation. We are working already. So although we've got a motion here today, our Executive Director for Place, Susan Halliwell, and I have been in meetings. We're working constantly to try to make sure that we're responding. We're getting guidance by the day. There is a role for the council to play. But as we get that guidance, as we get the data, we will continue to respond. So one of the things we've talked about today is the key nature of communication. So we'll be making sure that we communicate out to everybody so that they understand what the council response is, and the partnership work. And I think the partnership work is really key. We saw it work so well during COVID and our community support hub. We've agreed that a Ukraine support hub is the way to go to make sure that partnership continues. And I have every confidence in the communities of West Berkshire, because I've seen it firsthand, as we all have over the last 2 years. So I'm very happy to put this motion before you, and I'm very happy that you're supportive of it this evening. So thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, can you now conduct a formal vote on the substantive motion, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I will ask the Zoom host to display the vote. This is on motion A on the agenda, and if members could indicate how they wish to vote. Thank you. Just waiting. Councillor Bowick. Thank you. I can confirm, Chairman, that that motion has been carried unanimously.
Thank you. Members, we're going to move on then to motion C. In order to conduct the business this evening, we really need to conclude the debate on motions by 9:30. So again, I encourage you to be very succinct with the remaining motions so that we can take account of the remaining parts of the agenda. Looks like it should be a 2-minute break for comfort, as people are making their way out anyway. So.
Pressure you, Chair.
Pardon? Yeah, fine. Okay. So
if you wanted to come to break, Chairman, you've got all the power right now.
That's true, but I'm okay. Thank you. Can I invite Councillor Steve Masters to move motion C, please, in his name?
I move the motion C in my name. Chairman.
And Councillor Carver, you're seconding.
I second and reserve my rights, Chairman. Thank you.
Council will debate the motion this evening, hopefully fairly rapidly, in order to facilitate the discharge of business in accordance with Procedure Rule 4.9.8. Councillor Masters, would you like to introduce up to 5 minutes, please?
Thank you, Chairman. We're in unprecedented times, what with COVID, Brexit, and now the conflict in the Ukraine. The Chartered Institute of Environmental Health Practitioners and the charity End Fuel Poverty are calling for action, arguing that the UK's resilience on fossil gas for heating is a root cause of fuel poverty, exacerbated by poor quality housing. As energy bills are set to triple in April, the Institute has warned that fuel poverty is a health and social crisis, and urgent action by the government is needed now. Work by the independent think tank, the Resolution Foundation, found that the number of households in fuel crisis spending at least 10% of their family income on energy bills is set to triple to 6.3 million households from the start of April. This is the date the new energy price cap comes into effect and is expected to rise by 51%, translating to a rise in a minimum yearly energy cost from 1,277 under the previous cap to 1,925. And in the interest of moving the debate on, I'm just going to shorten what I'm going to say. So, as I mentioned, fuel poverty is a health and social crisis. So how do we do this? Reading the Financial Times today, they argued that it is time for a windfall tax on fossil fuel companies. They said the windfall tax is efficient precisely for the reasons tax professionals do not like it. It taxes past investment that cannot be withdrawn. Offshore Energies UK, the industry body, has furiously opposed it and says that investment will suffer. It's their own evidence suggests this is nonsense. Capital spending in the North Sea is down 90% since the oil price fell in 2014 in the event with the current and highly favourable tax regime. Worse, in arguing against a windfall tax, the North Sea lobby seem to believe that it's justifiable for oil and gas companies, their executives and investors to make money from the plight of the very Ukrainians that we spoke about earlier. We cannot expect companies individually to give up these gains, since they will worry about what their competitors will not follow suit. So it should be done collectively through the government imposing a windfall tax. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, this is still from the Financial Times, by the way, could drop his opposition and go further than what Labour have already proposed, reintroducing the 2011 regime for 21-22 tax year before announcing that regime will continue as long as oil and gas prices remain above the predetermined threshold. Remember, these are not punitive tax rates, but simply those that were imposed by a former Conservative-led government when the investment in the North Sea was at much higher than it is now. The rates are not arbitrary. They correct something that was wrong with the tax system. Smart companies should never have expected to walk away with gains while the rest of the country suffers. So, and moving on to a local level, local charities, as some of the members may be aware of, are already witnessing people heading towards struggling due to the impending cap removal. They're already, some local charities are already offering top-ups to prepaid smart meters so clients can cook food that they've been given from the food bank and other agencies. And we're also been told that community workers, that many people are asking for food that doesn't need to be cooked to be supplied because of the rising cost of domestic fuel. We shouldn't be putting larger and larger members of groups of our population into this financial crisis. And it's very likely that the rates are going to go even higher towards the end of the year. And many, many people, including some here, are going to witness substantial rises in their fuel costs on domestic level. And only on the front page of the Newbury News today, there was a story relating to the impact on local businesses. Many businesses are suffering the same prospect of higher utility bills moving forward. So I urge the company, the party opposite, who are the party of finance and good fiscal management, to support this motion and ensure that the most vulnerable and those who are not so vulnerable right now, but may well be in the future, are, have some provision and some flexibility. And insulation will help the net zero provision and targets that we've set both locally and nationally. So, and create jobs moving forward. So it's very much a win-win. Thank you, Chairman.
I'll open up the debate now. Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think we heard the claim there, I don't think I heard wrongly, that increased taxes would not decrease investment. That's a new one on me, and I suspect most economists. Councillor Masters is quoting from the FT. Was that the leader of the FT? Was that the opinion of the paper, or was it one of their crazy contributors having a rant again? I'm not sure. Well, even if it was the opinion of the FT, they did support Kinnock in 92.
Point of order, please, Chairman. Why does Councillor McKinnon have to resort to insults, whether towards members or people that have been, crazy people? Is that language becoming of a councillor?
Carry on, Councillor McKinnon.
Thanks, Chairman. Right. The FT did support Kinnock in 92, so they're not always very reliable on tax and economic matters, of course. A one-off, arbitrary and unexpected tax would do nothing except discourage investment in a key UK industry. The UK's oil and gas sector is world-leading, and in particular, cause close to my heart, benefits the Union of the UK with key sites in Aberdeen and Teesside. Sudden tax rate changes, of course, discourage investment. No one could possibly argue otherwise. And job creation. It would depress production at a time that we need to reduce our reliance on imported gas. The oil and gas industry and its supply chain support almost 200,000 jobs, although investment in 2020-21 was at an all-time low. There's £11 billion of opportunities awaiting investment, and a windfall tax would, of course, threaten that investment. Tax rates are already extremely high for this sector. The current tax rate charged on oil and gas profits is 40%, which is more than double the standard rate of corporation tax, and has been in place since 2016. So, no, I will not be supporting the calls for a windfall tax. What we as Conservatives do, though, we do recognise the very severe pressures that families are having on their budgets. And our approach is not a broad brush tax the evil oil companies approach, but it's a direct lifeline to less well-off households. It's worth £350 per household. We're spending £8.6 billion supporting hard-strapped families this year, with a £200 smoothing rebate on energy bills for all households, and a non-repayable £150 cash rebate for council tax bands A to D. On top of that, we've got £144 million of discretionary funding for local authorities to support households that aren't eligible for that council tax rebate. Reducing the VAT on oil and gas wouldn't be targeted. It would actually disproportionately benefit wealthy households, and there's no guarantee that businesses would pass on the saving. We prefer our government's approach to target directly those less well-off families, and that's what we'll be supporting tonight. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks.
The beauty of Google is you can look it up very quickly. And George Osborne shocked oil and gas companies by raising the supplementary charge in the 2011 budget from 20% to 32%. George Osborne did it, and yet Councillor McKinnon has sat there almost like the mouthpiece for a lobbying organisation for energy companies. So windfall taxes have been levied by both your party and by Labour in recent years. And shock horror, those companies went on to continue to make billions of pounds in profits. So you're just not really considering the crisis we're in. Energy prices, I've never seen such forecast before. We're not talking about 5% rises. We're talking about 30, 40, 50% rises. And so therefore, be in no doubt, we will be supporting this motion. However, I'd also say to thank you to Councillor Masters for just giving the publicity, the oxygen of publicity to Liberal Democrat policies, because frankly, we've been pushing these for quite some time and going much further than that. we have talked and pushed about suspending VAT. We pushed for a windfall tax. We pushed for retrofit insulation. We violently agree. I think we just got there before you, the Greens. But let's not be too political, although they're looking for quite a lot of politics tonight, these three. So happy to indulge them if they want to. But on this, we'll be supporting them. And I don't need the cant and the hypocrisy of the Conservatives sitting there saying a windfall tax is terrible. You did it before, so it ain't something you haven't got form on. So we'll be supporting it, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Macro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Windfall profits is what we're talking about. The reason these companies are making windfall profits is because they are charging world commodity prices, but the stuff they're pumping out of the ground is costing them just as much as it did before. And according to Investopedia, the profit margins for oil and gas production in 2021 was 4.7%. In the quarter 4 of 2021, it was 31.3%. So if they were going to invest in extra production facilities at 4.7%, I am sure they would do so. And if they're making a profit of over 30%, even with a windfall tax. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ardell-Walton.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So I won't repeat the dialogue we've just been having on the endless money bank, which is evil company profits. I instead would rather just come back to the other two parts of Councillor Master's motion regarding the desire to solve this undeniable problem. And I think we all agree this is a major challenge for the less well off in this country, to solve that problem through a VAT suspension and through a nationwide retrofit insulation program. So on the VAT thing, again, I think that is a inefficient, broad brush intervention whereby everybody from the wealthiest, indeed the owners have said evil oil companies, down to those genuinely hard up would equally benefit. That would be hugely inefficient. And so just for that measure alone, I could not support this. The other point on nationwide retrofit, while insulation absolutely and undeniably is a good thing, there is simply not enough capacity within the building industry to do wide-scale insulation at the present time. We as a council have been struggling to get suitable contractors to increase our bandwidth of insulation work. I'm looking forward to an increase here, but it will take months and months of work to get said people and contracts and household and so forth. So I totally would support more retrofit insulation. I cannot support the VAT part, and I cannot therefore support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Cotton.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an extreme exception. We need to be looking at this radically.
Councillor Cotton, can you speak loudly into the microphone? We can't really hear you.
Shall I try again?
Yes.
Right, who's on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you. This is an extreme exception. A lot of people are going to be forced into fuel poverty with this. We really have to look at this more carefully. As a businessman, I've seen over my life, investments are planned over years ahead, and they're thought about and planned, especially in a huge industry like oil or gas. Things don't happen just that year. It happens over 2 or 3 years minimum. So an excess profit over a short term will not affect investments at all. It's a windfall exactly as it's described. And we should support this because I think we have to take action on this immediately. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Cant, briefly, if you please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I must say I'm very disappointed. Once again, we appear to be being drawn back into an extensive and lengthy discussion about central government policy, rather than focusing and concentrating on what we can do as a council to ameliorate the impact of some of these issues on our local community. And I really I'm getting increasingly frustrated and tired by extensive discussions about the pros and cons of VAT and relief of this and that, which is beyond our remit. What we can focus and should focus on is what are we going to do about the the impact of these issues on our local community, particularly those of the poorest. So I should definitely be voting against this, as I would against anything which is yet another debate on the central government policy.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffries.
Oh, God. Thank you, Chairman. Let me reassure the largest group on this council. A single one-off tax due to exceptional circumstances will not destroy an industry. It will not deter an industry. It's clear, it is limited, it's one-off, and it will do no harm to the oil and gas industry.
Thank you. That concludes the debate. Can I ask Councillor Culver to start the closure, please?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Those of us who are on the planning committee will know that policy CS15 states West Berkshire district is one of the highest electricity users in the southeast and is in the upper quartile of local authorities for CO2 emissions within the region. Fuel poverty levels in West Berkshire are also high compared to other authorities. So this is extremely relevant to us this evening. We're not just talking about central government policy. You know, if people don't want to talk about politics, maybe they shouldn't be a politician. You know, these issues are relevant. These issues are of relevance to us in this area, as our own planning policies show. We do need more insulation and heat pumps. The Green Deal scheme for home insulation was abandoned and the Green Homes grant was scrapped after 6 months. Only 47,500 homes were improved instead of the 600,000 that the government promised, and thousands of jobs have been lost. Cutting insulation programmes in the last 10 years has added around £1 billion to people's energy bills. Colleagues this evening have talked about the amount of tax and that would be a deterrent. We should also remember the amount of subsidies, public subsidies, that the fossil fuel industry gets. And just as a final point, individual members of this chamber don't have a monopoly on understanding of the economy. There are very, very many different opinions on the economy and economic theory. I myself am a political economist by training, and I'm sure we would disagree on many different things, but economics is a big topic and people have different approaches to it, vis-a-vis tax and so on. And I think this is, as other colleagues have said, this is a very urgent matter and I think we need to give it serious attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steve Masters.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'm mindful that it has gone on and it may be getting close to some members' bedtime. So I urge the Council to take this motion forward, vote and support very drastically and with a substantial contribution to the economy the motion before us. Thank you, Chairman.
Members, I'll now ask Sarah to conduct a vote on this motion.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll ask the Zoom host now to display on members' screens the voting panel, and if members could use their microphones to vote, indicate whether they support or oppose motion C. Okay, thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that that motion has been lost.
Thank you. Members, I'm going to propose that we take a short 10-minute break and may change the agenda slightly afterwards to keep us in time with the meeting. Now we have Motion E, please. Can I invite Councillor Tony Vickers to move this motion?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd be surprised if these old estates with garage blocks don't exist.
Just move the motion.
Oh, sorry, I moved the motion. Trying to save time.
Is the motion being seconded? Thank you, Councillor Cotton. The Council will not debate the motion this evening. In accordance with Procedure Rule 4.9.8, this will be referred to the Planning Advisory Group and the Transport Advisory Group for consideration, as the detail of the motion falls within the remit of the Executive. A report will be considered at the Planning Advisory Group and Transport Advisory Group and Executive, and the outcome of that will be reported to the Council. Councillor Vickers will be kept fully informed and is invited to attend both meetings. Councillor Vickers, would you just like to spend a short introduction to this and then we'll move on?
Thank you, Chairman. As I say, I'd be surprised if these old estates with garage blocks don't exist in all our wards in the district and in most of England. In my own Wash Common ward, well over 100 homes have been deprived of the convenient private parking off local roads that they were built to provide. 2 such blocks have been either developed or ready for housing with no provision to replace these spaces for existing properties, or in the case of Pond Close, have been sold to a developer who's met with fierce resistance and lost 3 appeals already for his proposals to build more homes. So I want to explain why now I think is the time to work up a solution. We have a new local plan being prepared for presentation at July's full council. We have a new car club partner with ambitions to offer us 50 EV cars across the whole district. We face a cost of living crisis where every measure to reduce cost of essential travel needs to be taken. The climate emergency has not gone away, so we should maximise opportunities to reduce the embedded carbon in private cars that are used only 5% of their life and spend the rest taking up valuable road space and the use of carbon fuels. But EVs are still too expensive for most households to afford to buy, so let's use locally based rented ones. The 2021 update of the NPPF says planning policies and decisions should promote an effective use of land in meeting the need for homes and other uses, and give substantial weight to the value of using brownfield land within settlements for homes and other identified needs, and support appropriate opportunities to remediate derelict land, all of which applies to garage blocks. And also promote and support the development of underutilized land and buildings, and take a proactive role in identifying and helping to bring forward land that may be suitable for meeting development needs, using the full range of powers available, including compulsory purchase powers where necessary. On parking standards, the NPPF says local parking standards and policies for residential development should take into account the need to ensure an adequate provision of spaces for charging plug-in vehicles. So this motion calls for our local plan and the subsequent linked new transport plan to consider how we can proactively encourage redevelopment of some of these bits of residential land that have been changed into what is really B8 storage use without consent, and to again become available to locals in a climate-friendly way for their parking and parking EV car club cars. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Stay in gear because we now move to motion F, and can I invite you again to move this motion?
Move this motion, Chair.
I believe Councillor Eric Packenden is seconding.
I'm seconding the motion, Chairman. Thank you.
And are you reserving the right?
Reserving my rights. Thank you.
Okay. The Council will debate the motion this evening, hopefully rapidly, in order to facilitate the discharge of business in accordance with our procedures. Can I ask Councillor Vickers to speak to the motion, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I will be briefer than the 5 minutes I'm allowed. Chairman, this is the third motion relating to planning and land reform that I've tried to introduce in 3 years. The previous 2 were more focused on planning reform and wider reform of land policy, but they did get cross-party support, for which I'm grateful. 9 months, though, have passed since the leader said she was working through her party channels to secure progress with planning reforms, and it's still unclear when we'll see the promised new planning bill or what will be in it. But last autumn, Lib Dems passed a motion at their conference naming and shaming the piece of legislation that is primarily to blame. This is the 1961 Land Compensation Act. Since our pre-war public sector land holdings were largely used up which was by the early 80s after I'd moved out of the building industry, Britain has been building some of the highest priced, worst insulated, smallest homes in Europe. No wonder anyone with money prefers to buy a home built before that legislation took a grip. On our party's Homes and Planning Policy Group, all the expert witnesses, even smaller developers, and I've spoken to several local ones, have agreed that land prices are the biggest problem. And your own 2017 Conservative Manifesto highlighted this too. Land is now 70% of the price of a house. We are allowing an obscene amount of wealth created by the community to fall unearned into the lap of those happening to hold title to it. For Sandalford, in my ward, the uplift in market value when it was designated for housing was 100-fold, not 100%, 100-fold. It can be 200 nearer London. In Germany, landowners have to be content with no more than 10 times agricultural value, which isn't bad for doing nothing except selling your title. Now, only Parliament can remove the right for vendors to receive the so-called hope value. Public bodies must be allowed to recover the value that the public and the wider private economic activity creates. Otherwise, we'll all go to hell in a handcart. Now, this may take a few years to work through, just as the original 1961 Act did, which did the damage. We can't scrap deals already made between landowners and developers. It's not their fault that landowners and volume home builders take advantage of this law. This motion just sets out, I think, a reasonable position. We have a direct line through the LGA and the government, so please let's use it to demand change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. Can I invite any members wishing to speak on this motion to indicate now? Councillor McKinnon.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman, and thanks, Councillor Vickers, for your motion. I wanted to use the analogy that this is a sledgehammer to crack a nut, but the problem of housing supply is a little more than a nut. No one disputes that we need more houses, but there's all sorts of blockages to those houses coming online. We've got NIMBYism, we've got developers land banking, not building out planning permissions that they have. And the motion reads quite nicely until the end, when in quite innocent language, it reveals that local authorities will compulsorily purchase land at its existing use value. Now, what that is expropriating private property for a song. Now, we believe in private property rights, and for any economy and political system to work, it's crucial that everyone has confidence that those rights will be upheld. Now, I don't doubt that the motion has the best intentions, but land reform along these lines has already been partially attempted by the disastrous SNP administration in Scotland. And the result there is that landowners are far less likely to let land to farming tenants, leading to a reduction in reluctance of tenant farmers to take on leases because they lack confidence that they won't be turfed off the land. Now, the grounds for change report cited, it isn't really a report at all. It's a collection of essays from various interested parties, and I don't think that's the basis for setting policy. A little bit more work and details required. So I think, to stretch my awful analogy, it's a faulty sledgehammer to crack a really big tough nut, but it might end up bouncing back and smashing us in the face.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Chair. As time is short, I'll just say that I and my fellow Green Party councillors strongly support Councillor Tony Vickers' motion and will be voting for it. Thank you.
Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, thank you, Councillor Vickers, for bringing it forward. I think for me, noting the date of the report and the obvious intervention of COVID since then, it does feel to me like it's a bit more of an updated position would be beneficial. My understanding is that Levelling Up White Paper has some revisions coming and planning reforms are expected this spring. I think these will provide that refreshed position that we need. Under those circumstances, my preference would be to wait for that to be delivered, and if it's appropriate and acceptable, to take that to PAG, maybe even PAG-TAG, for a full rounded conversation, and to bring officers into that conversation as well. As a council, we've got a good position on affordable housing, and the rate for developers at 40% is higher than many other planning authorities. Councillor Vickers, I did offer to meet with you outside of chambers, and that offer still stands. And for clarity, I fully recognise that it's my diary that's caused a problem with that, but I'm happy to re-extend that offer, and we can have that conversation. I'm afraid in this occasion I won't be supporting the motion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Councillor Law.
Thank you, Chairman. I actually, much of what Councillor Sumner has just said, he's stolen my thunder, which makes it doubly right, of course. I have sympathy with this because I think the broad analysis of the problem of that act and the impact on land values, you're absolutely correct, Councillor Vickers. What I don't agree with is some of the supporting facts and figures that you have here. I would question, for example, the fact that in the last 20 years, value of land has risen by 550%, and all the increase in national wealth for the last 10 years are kind of by land value. We've been talking tonight about the evil empire of the fossil companies, so they haven't added to the national wealth at all. Banks haven't added to national wealth. I'm agreeing with you, but I think you're buttering all this up, and I think some of these facts are very open to challenge. And I particularly am concerned, and the reason I won't support this tonight is the point about prices much closer to existing use values that you're recommending. I think there's a lot of thought needs to go into it, and therefore, as I would agree with my colleague Councillor Sumner, I would like this to have a good old debate and get the officers involved at PIG and try to take it that way. And if we are going to take it forward that way, you're likely to get an administration supported recommendation or otherwise. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I see no further hands. So, Councillor Pattenden, would you like to speak now?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sure we all know people that want to buy their own home and haven't been able to do so. And we're all very conscious that the cost of buying a house in the UK is far too high. It affects the property market from first-time buyers through to people that have owned houses for a long time. We probably already know people that can't afford to buy a house themselves, or find themselves living in a house that's unsuitable for them. And given the current rise in the cost of living, the number of these people is rising as well. Unlike in countries like the Netherlands and Germany that have much lower land pricing, in England, people are forced to spend a vast proportion of their incomes on either mortgages or rent, leaving them too little for the rest of their needs. And that's obviously a bigger problem for those on lower incomes. A huge part of the cost of a house is derived from the cost of the land. And reforming the 1961 Land Compensation Act offers an effective way to do this. Councillor McKinnon, it's in the last chapter of the Grounds for Change document where it's described in detail about how that would go ahead. Are we continuing?
Carry on, Councillor.
Can I point you towards the last chapter of the Grounds for Change report, Councillor McKinnon, where it's described in detail about how this would actually work? There's a target of across the country of building in excess of 300,000 homes. Without doing something radical, we're never going to achieve that target. And particularly, I think, Councillor Sumner, you mentioned affordable homes. We're never going to achieve the target that we've got for building affordable homes, particularly, without doing something like reforming the Land Compensation Act in the way that this proposes. So I urge you to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hilary Cole, do you wish to say anything on the motion?
Sorry, Chairman, I couldn't find my mute button. I have a degree of sympathy with what, just as Councillor Law has, with what Councillor Vickers is aiming to achieve, but I don't think this motion is necessarily the right vehicle for it. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to come back on a few points. I mean, the figures in my motion, the 550% increase, that is from the National Statistics Office. It's from the Treasury book. It's there for if you want to check up on it. I think it's 2 years old, the data that I look at, because that's the way that statistics work. So those are facts. Everything in those four ICEs, in those 4 bullet points are facts. And as Councillor Patterson said, there is no way, absolutely no way, unless we tackle the land question somehow or other in a radical way, that we're going to achieve the targets that we're setting. It is just feeding the beast of the volume home builders. So we've got to do something radical. And I think what's happening with the planning bill, and I know somebody who's actually working on this, so I know the inside story a bit, is there's a big argument going on inside your party. And it was going on during the coalition between Michael Gove and the Secretary of State, Eric Pickles. Gove wanted land auctions, which is classic economic theory. And it was actually a Lib Dem academic that proposed it. Pickles thought it was the next best thing to communism. There are people in your government, including Michael Gove, who support taking radical measures on land auctions. So I'm very interested to see what they do come up with. But I believe there are some, like Councillor McKinnon, I'm afraid, who seem to think that the market can solve everything. Well, it can't. The market cannot solve the land issue. And talking about much closer to existing use value, much closer than 100-fold increase in land value. As I said, a 10-fold increase in something which you've done nothing to create is not bad, really. Where else can you get it? Apart from winning on the GGs, you know? And just by owning the land in the right place, you know? So it's got to be tackled, gents and ladies. And I'm sorry if it upsets some of your friends who've got shares in those companies, but it's got to happen. So let's have a debate outside of here, but I wanted it to be in the public at some stage, and planning advisory group is not adequate. But let's have a sensible debate in private, in PAG, and let's see if we can come to a compromise, which I think is going to have to happen in government as well fairly soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, I'll now ask Sarah to conduct a vote on this motion in front of you.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can ask the Zoom host to display the vote and ask members to indicate whether they wish to support or oppose motion F on land reform. Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that that motion has been lost.
Thank you. Members, the last motion, building the new hospital. Can I invite Councillor Alan Macchio to move this motion?
Could I move the motion, please?
Do I understand that you're making a minor alteration to the motion?
Pardon?
Do I understand that you're making a minor alteration?
As opposed to what was in the original papers, yeah.
This is being seconded by Councillor Andy Moore.
That's correct.
Right. The Council will not debate this motion this evening. In accordance with the procedure in Rule 4.9.8, this is going to be referred to the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee for consideration, as the detail of the motion falls within the remit of that committee. A report will be considered at the Health and Overview Scrutiny Committee, and the outcome of that will be reported to Council, and Councillor Macro will be kept fully informed and is invited to attend the meetings. Councillor Macro, you can have 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes for your introduction of this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was under the impression it was going to be referred to the Health and Wellbeing Board.
I understand that the Health and the right home for it is the Scrutiny Committee.
Well, thank you. I welcome that. Thank you very much. The Royal Berkshire Hospital Trust have been consulting on various options for the future of the hospital. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and it must be got right. The first time I visited the hospital, it was just the original 1839 built classical building and the south block, which is separated by a very long cold covered walkway. It's come a long way since then, but still has many major problems. First time I tried to park in the new hospital's multi-storey, I was trapped for about half an hour. There were vehicles going round and round looking for spaces that weren't there, and I just had to exit without parking. And also I know from personal experience that parking either in that multi-storey or in surrounding roads is very hard to find and it's very expensive. The hospital is difficult or impossible for many West Berkshire residents to access by public transport. Access by private car or even ambulance can be time consuming, especially at peak times. My wife was an inpatient in the hospital in South Block for 5 months in 2019. Visiting her reinforced my view of this extremely poor building. It accommodates operating theatres, surgical wards and ICU, and is certainly not suitable for any of that. Its walls are very thin, the wards are too cold in the winter and too hot in the summer. The heat loss and therefore CO2 emissions must be appalling. Anyone who's visited the audiology department will realise it is largely housed in 1950s era prefabricated buildings. So the Trust have put forward several options for redeveloping the existing site, all of which keep the poor South Block, and one for a new hospital on a new site. The Trust has not yet identified a site for a new hospital. Reading Borough Council has officially supported redevelopment on the existing site. This would, of course, do nothing to address the problems I've mentioned. Woking Borough Council has suggested a site in their local plan review. The site will be on a large area they're proposing to allocate for 2,000 plus houses on the opposite side of the M4 to Lower Early. Needless to say, this would be much harder for West Berkshire residents to access by either car or public transport. For these reasons, I'm therefore asking this council to resolve that its preferred option is for a new hospital to be built on a site that can be more easily accessed by West Berkshire residents than the existing hospital, and also that the Royal Berkshire Hospital Trust be informed of this preference. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Members, I'd like to propose at this stage that we have an extension of the meeting tonight from 10 o'clock to 10:30 to allow a maximum opportunity to conduct as much business as possible. I think we may struggle even then. Can I have a seconder, please?
Very happy to second, Chairman.
Members, I will now ask Sarah to conduct a formal vote regarding that extension.
You can do a show of hands if you want.
That's a good suggestion. Councillor Brooks will have a show of hands, please.
Chairman, I can confirm that that has been carried.
Thank you. We'll move to item 7 on the agenda, which is the membership of committees. The Leader of the Council has proposed a number of changes to committee membership in line with politically balanced arrangements. This, I think, will be shown on the screen. I believe the seconder is Councillor Bridgman.
Certainly second, Chairman.
Chairman, I believe that there are some other amendments from the Liberal Democrat group, and I think they can be moved at the same time because the council is required to give effect to the wishes of the groups in effect. So if they wish to be moved to foreshorten this process.
Chairman, do I have to just talk to that?
Just, yeah, and they will go on the screen. Just.
I'm moving the changes.
And I'm very happy again to second, Chairman, to get them forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The changes have been displayed to you. Can we move to a vote?
I can do a show of hands.
Okay. Yeah.
4 members can raise their hands in favour of the proposed amendments to committees. Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that has been carried.
Excellent. Excellent. You'll be sitting here soon, Jeff. Right, turning to item 8, motions from previous meetings. Members, I invite you to note the response to a motion set out in the summons, which was tabled at the previous council meeting. As the motion was discussed and responded to at the Overview and Scrutiny Management Commission on the meeting on the 31st of August, and you've all been sent a link to those minutes, we will not be revisiting the discussion on that item in this meeting. So I'll turn to agenda items 9 to 16, and I'll ask you to note the information in the summons relating to each of the committees listed in the agenda items 9 to 16. I intend to take these on block, noting where those committees have and have not met. Does any member wish to speak on that? Thank you. Can we turn to item 17, which is the statutory pay policy? And can I invite Councillor Howard Wollaston to formally move the recommendations on page 57 of the agenda pack?
Thank you, Chairman. I move.
I believe the seconder is Councillor James Cole.
I am happy to second.
Do you wish to reserve your right?
I can reserve my right.
Thank you. Councillor Wollaston, would you like to introduce your report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be very brief. Members will no doubt recall from previous years that we are under a statutory duty under the Localism Act 2011 to publish an annual pay policy statement. This will take effect on April 1st, 2022, and this report seeks formal approval from full council to issue this statement. I should mention that since the papers have been issued, the settlement has been agreed at 1.75%, which will be incorporated into the published statement. This is very much a housekeeping issue, and as such, I would expect completely uncontroversial. Given the timing, I would hope that it can be agreed without too much debate. Thank you, Chairman.
Members, does anyone wish to speak on this item? I see no hands. Councillor Cole.
I see no reason to add to this. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Wollaston, do you have any more to say?
Nothing further, Chairman. Thank you.
In which case, I'll ask Sarah to conduct a vote.
Do you want to?
Yeah, yes. It seems to be the fashion of the moment.
Yes, I think, Chairman, that vote has been carried on a show of hands. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Right, we move to item 20, which is members' questions. I understand that Councillor Jeffrey has withdrawn his question, leaving questions A and C from Councillor Martha Vickers to be answered both by Councillor Richard Sumner.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Vickers, for your question. Through the recently approved capital programme, the council is investing significantly in improving and maintaining both footways and cycleways. In total, we will be spending approximately £5 million over the next 5 years, which represents 13% of the highway asset capital programme. In previous years, we have traditionally spent less than 10%. I think that demonstrates the commitment to active travel. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Vickers, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. I know that government grants have been given for increasing active travel, but from your answer, it sounds as though the council, which is what I wanted reassurance on, is allocating more of its own budget to pavements, footways, rather than concentrating on roads. So that's good to hear. And I hope that included in that, could you reassure me that existing pavements are being improved and it's not just additional? And included in that is removal of encroaching vegetation and overhanging hedges, which makes some pavements almost impassable. And if the council would like some guidance on where the priorities for improvements lie, maybe it could ask members to give priorities in their wards. Is this something that the council could consider?
Okay, there's several points in that. We do bolster and contribute to the overall budget. We would look to vegetation being a countryside issue rather than specifically a highways issue, and certainly an active travel issue. And if there are specific areas that are in need, any member or member of the public is able to report a problem via our website, which will bring the issue straight into the heart of the relevant teams.
Thank you. Shall we move to question C? Councillor Sumner.
There you go. Thank you, Chairman. And again, thank you, Councillor Vickers, for your question. I would sincerely hope that all our residents will act responsibly when choosing to own any pet, especially a dog. Good advice on responsible dog ownership can be found on the Council's Public Protection Partnership Facebook page or on the RSPCA website.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. I'm sure you, like me and other members, have seen the problems that that I've mentioned here, and I'm just wondering what the situation is with the dog. Is there still a dog warden employed by the council, and what the dog warden's duties are, and could they not assist here where there are problems? And has the council considered employing or approaching the volunteers such as the Dogs Trust to assist in training? Because training of new dog owners, I think, is a priority here, so they know how to properly manage their dogs and public can be protected.
Loving the multiple question approach. I'll just cherry pick, if I may, and say that yes, the council does still employ a dog warden, and that area is probably quite extensive. But the dog warden is still there. I'm happy to pick up any of the other points with you outside of this chamber.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, members. Right, we turn to item 18, which is the last item on our part 1 agenda. Can I remind members not to discuss any of the content of the part 2 appendix during this part 1 discussion? If we don't need to refer to the content of the appendix, then we can conclude the business in the part 1 business, which I think would be preferable if that's acceptable. Can I invite Councillor Ross McKinnon to formally move the recommendation on page 83 of the summons, and then I'll ask for a seconder.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, happy to propose the recommendations in the paper.
Okay. I believe the seconder is Councillor Graham Bridgman.
Certainly, Chairman, and I reserve my right.
Councillor McKinnon, can I ask you to introduce the report?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yes, this matter has arisen from a request from a member for access to exempt and legally privileged information. The particulars of the case have already been subject of a motion to this council in December 2020, which was responded to by the executive in March 2021. The matter before us this evening relates to the principle of when a member from either side of the chamber has the right to access sensitive information and when that right should be limited. The statutory guidance is clear that members of a principal council do not have an unrestricted right to access documents pertaining to a decision made by the council, the executive, its committees or officers who may be acting under delegated authority. The Local Government Acts of 1972 and 2000 and the snappily named Local Authorities Executive Arrangements Meeting and Access to Information England Regulations of 2012 all place limitations on members' right of access, specifically on the grounds of information in respect of which a claim to legal professional privilege could be maintained in legal proceedings. In this particular instance, the monitoring officer, who is also the senior solicitor of the council, has provided advice that the document contains exempt information and should not be disclosed. In addition to the statutory framework, case law, principally the Birmingham case in 1983, has established that elected members have a right at common law to access information that they need to know to discharge their duties as a councillor. Now, the document reviewed different options open to the council to resolve a particular matter and contained legal advice on the potential implications of the various options available. The document would remain exempt from disclosure even in the event of legal proceedings against the council, in the absence of a court order requiring it. There can be no need to know legally privileged information. Now, following the decision of the Governance and Ethics Committee to refer this matter to full council, the council has sought external advice from a leading public and administrative law barrister whose advice supports the council's position on the non-disclosure of the document, and that a need to know has not been demonstrated. The Council's constitution also considers the question of access to information and broadly reflects the legal position I've just stated. In particular, relevant sections are 2.3.5, which says that documents dealing with individuals or other confidential matters may not be available, and Section 13.3.7, which makes clear that if a member is not a member of a specific body dealing with the matter under review, they must satisfy the chief executive or the relevant director why sight of the documents is necessary to perform their duties. Now, I would also like to consider the implications for the business and governance of the Council if this request were to be granted. It's of fundamental importance that decision makers within the Council, whether they be the Executive Committee, the individual executive members or individual officers, have access to freely given and comprehensive advice. Now, it's entirely proper for a full analysis to be made of the possible scenarios arising from a sensitive decision, including the financial, reputational, legal and other impacts in the event of the Council being successfully challenged. In fact, it would be a serious failure of risk assessment and corporate governance not to do so. It does not follow, though, that the performing of this analysis indicates any thinking on the Council's part that its position is in any way flawed or that it's keeping relevant information secret. It's absolutely crucial that those advising decision makers within the Council, both external and internal, are confident of that advice being kept confidential and not subject to wider disclosure. If that confidence were to be damaged in any way, then it must be that any advice may no longer be freely given and be influenced, at least to a degree, by the prospect of being disclosed in a manner that may adversely impact the Council's position. The result being that executive members and officers of the Council will no longer benefit from the best professional advice available. This would be an unacceptable erosion of the good governance of the Council. It's worth noting that a recurring theme of the various Section 114 reports issued recently by auditors of failing councils was a criticism of council governance and a failure to conduct proper risk assessment. I would expect the opposition to vote responsibly and vote against and not vote against the recommendation, and I hope that that will be the case. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Can I invite anybody else who wishes to speak on this motion, this report, to indicate now? Councillor Brooks.
Well, it's your old friend Sil, come back to bite you. I said it would go on and on and on and on, and here it is again. Get used to it. There'll be plenty more times yet. You see, when Councillor McKinnon talks about confidentiality, it suggests to me that he has no confidence that Councillor Rolls will keep this information confidential if she were to have sight of it. What a disgraceful thing to actually articulate. If I give you this information, it may come into the public domain. That's what you seem to be saying. Members here understand the consequences of Part 2 information, and you have just, frankly, said you don't trust her to keep it confidential. I will tell this chamber that the resident in question went to Councillor Rolls and to me, begging us to help in this scandalous Sil situation that you continue to stand behind. His ward councillor, Councillor Wollaston, is part of your front bench, and I suspect compromised in what he can do for his resident. And in this report, this internal report, there clearly will be information that somebody here should see to understand what we are doing with this resident, who has been under this sword of Damocles for some years on the way you will collect this money and chase him for it. So it is perfectly reasonable for you to share what steps you are taking to bring this to a conclusion. And yet you are hiding behind this spurious reasoning to say, we can't see it. Councillor Rose can't see it. Now, I understand there is sensitive information. There will be a risk for people in care, for people under threat of violence. I'm not sure what you're trying to indicate, Ross, but I'm carrying on. Thank you. Good of you to let me. So we do understand there will be occasions in Guardian ad litem. There'll be occasions where we say that's just too sensitive, but I don't believe that this passes that test. And this poor resident, hounded by this administration, needs help and support. And this is another way of you ratcheting down on him getting proper justice. So never mind Councillor McKinnon reaching out to us to actually, I hope you will be responsible and support you. I'm going to be responsible and actually vote that this information is allowed to be seen by every councillor here, frankly. And I tell you what I'll do next. When you vote this down tonight, I'm going to bring question after question after question to executive about what you're doing in this case. Get ready for them.
Councillor Rolls.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, this is about democracy. This is about doing the role we were elected to do, being the voice of our residents. This is about transparency and it's about fairness. This is about integrity, all values I hold dear as a Conservative. Members do not have an unqualified right to access to information, which is undisputed. And the portfolio holder is right that legally privileged information is exempt information under the LGA Act 1972. But he makes a glaring omission, as do officers, that under that clause 10 of the Act, exempt information is only such if, in all the circumstances, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. I believe the public have a right to know why we are treating residents differently on enforcement, which is a reasonable request. Why did we demand immediate payment from a Kimpbury resident but gave the Lambourne resident 2 years to pay? Why did we threaten the Kimpbury resident with court proceedings but have not taken the Lambourne resident to court? Why did the Kimpbury resident have to pay interest but the Lambourne one doesn't? Why did we turn up on the Kimpbury resident's doorstep, pin a demand notice in her garden, discuss her case with the neighbours, but didn't do this with the Lambourne one? It feels like a postcode lottery, and these questions remain unanswered. Clause 13.3.6, which everybody seems to be avoiding of the Constitution, unequivocally states where officers consider that information is of a confidential nature, which should not be openly available to the public or press, this information will be supplied to members on a private and confidential basis. Any information provided to members on this basis will be treated as such and will not be circulated outside the council. The Constitution categorically states members will be supplied with the information on a confidential basis. Denying me access when I am bound by confidentiality clearly questions my integrity. Now, the council has an obtained opinion from a QC. We can all find barristers to back up our argument. I was deliberately not given this opportunity, which would have presented members with a balanced view. The opinion also only seems to focus on the need to know point and not on clause 13.3.6 or the public interest point. Members, I am just trying to do my job as a councillor, to challenge and hold the council to account on behalf of residents. To close down this request is closing down the very cornerstones of our democracy and the role we were elected to do as members. This sets a very dangerous precedent. It begs the ultimate question: what has this council got to hide and why are they so nervous about this report? If I am not supported tonight, members, I will be making an FOI request for this information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rolls. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chairman. I find there are a series of holes in the legal argument. For example, in 5.18, there's an example given that's perfectly true but completely irrelevant. 5.26, the writer of the paper tries to tell us that the fact that a resident YYY is paid means that the document related to XXX is not relevant. It is relevant, as we appear to have applied different enforcement considerations to YYY when compared to XXX. To me, the whole point here seems to be that Councillor Rolls is trying to establish why different criteria were applied between XXX and YYY, and officers are stopping her from doing so, without acceptable reason being given. 5.11 we're told, and this little bit's going to get boring because three of us are saying the same thing in a row. If a member's motive for accessing the document is indirect, improper, or ulterior, there is no obligation on the council to provide access to that. In very round terms, she did have a need to know. Officers should not have withheld documentation that should have been shown confidentially. Are officers really telling us they did not trust Councillor Rolls with the information on a confidential basis? Council's now gone to the expense for QC's opinion. I can go to 3 QCs, get 3 different opinions, with the actual options are yes or no. This whole thing comes across as if it is not permitted to challenge officers. Actually, the public wants us to challenge officers where we deem it necessary. It is part of what we were elected to do. I was elected to represent the residents of my ward. And one of the residents of my ward, I've never actually met, it's not the person that Councillor Brooks was referring to, does appear to have been wronged. And this council does appear to have chosen to cover this up. If this is really the case, this is immoral, unethical, and this must cease. What Councillor Rolls is trying to do is uncover the truth. She's being stopped from doing so. In my view, this should never have reached this stage. I've been copied in on emails flying back and forth where there should have been face-to-face discussion. It did not happen. I hate to go against my party colleagues, but this is a ward issue. I'm really sorry. I cannot vote for this motion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Councillor Masters.
Thank you, Chairman. I wish to commend Councillor Rolls and Councillor Cole for the work that they've done on this on a cross-party basis. This case is obviously something that Councillor Brooks is very passionate about, and it's something that a number of councillors have had in reports of similar incidents with SIL. I have 2 questions. How many councillors have been privy to this information? And is it a particular case that Councillor Rowles has been excluded exceptionally? And also, it seems an odd hill for the council to die on. How much more money are we going to spend defending something that could be rectified by trusting Councillor Rolls? And I think this is Councillor Brooks has alluded to it, Councillor Cole also. This is a lack of trust on Councillor Rolls, and not uniquely amongst her colleagues. I've always found Councillor Rolls to be full of integrity and somebody who is utmost respectful. And many of her fellow councillors could take a leaf out of her book for how she handles herself with great dignity. So I ask, have other councillors been privy to this information? And and it may be a part 2 for the answer to how much it cost, which I'm sure it will be a part 2 because they don't want to be seen to be spending the money in the public domain. And it is about integrity, and this is it. We are. Every time somebody questions an officer, the shout goes up from the opposite benches, mostly, that you shouldn't denigrate or disrespect the officers. It's not about disrespecting officers. It's about maximising the transparency and making sure that we scrutinise. And unfortunately, at times, the scrutiny is dismissed out of hand. So I commend Councillor Rolls for bringing it so far. And I know it's not been done easily, and I understand Councillor Cole, he's disquiet about going against his group, but there's times when you need to make a stand, and I welcome this.
Councillor Law.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. There's a point of order here. This was, I take exception. I agree with the Councillor Masters, by the way, and his interpretation and reading of Councillor Rolls, full of integrity, scruples, etc. But he then went on to imply that some of her colleagues don't have that. And I think that is disgraceful, and I would ask him to withdraw that part of his statement.
I'd be happy to withdraw if Councillor Law apologised for the Khmer Rouge jibes that we've heard about.
Thank you. That's enough of that. Right. Did you have anything else to say, Councillor Law? You still have a hand raised.
No, I'll take my hand down, but I'd like a ruling on that, please, Chairman.
I don't think that there's a ruling on that.
So you don't agree that the integrity of some members were impinged?
Point of order, Chairman.
I think if members feel that another member has been disrespectful, then the process by which to deal with that would be by way of a formal complaint, if members feel that that's appropriate outside of this chamber.
I don't think we need to take that any further, please, members. Councillor Bridgman, I see no other hands for the debate. Would you like to make your statement?
Thank you, Chairman. Members, it has been said that we have to challenge our officers. I entirely agree. But I also say that in certain circumstances, we also have to trust our officers. And in this case, if the monitoring officer, the council's senior legal advisor, determines that information is exempt from production, it is exempt from production. And I also say, as a lawyer, that legally privileged information needs to stay legally privileged. There is a reason for that. I would be horrified if, as a litigation lawyer, I discovered that some advice I had given in confidence to my client had been disclosed anywhere beyond my client. As Councillor McKinnon rightly points out, a member's right to information must necessarily be fettered. And I agree that 13.3.6 of the Constitution sets out how confidential information can be disclosed in confidence to a member. But the section explicitly refers to the council's access to information rules, and the position there is that exempt information is not the same as confidential information. And I suggest that an FOI request on that subject will be met with the same position. The position evinced by the monitoring officer is not that this information is purely confidential, and I say that it has nothing to do with trust or otherwise in a member.
Just said it was.
It has nothing to do with trust or otherwise in a member. It has everything to do with officers giving unfettered advice and exempt information remaining exempt. So, members, I agree with the monitoring officer's determination as to exempt. I don't look behind that. I accept that she has determined that this is exempt information, and we should not look behind that for the good of all of us when whichever party is in administration receiving unfettered advice from officers, and officers not anticipating that that will go wider than they intend it to when they give it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor McKinnon.
Yes, Councillor Bridgman is absolutely right. There's been a lot of noise around specific cases this evening. We're here talking about the principle of when exempt and legally sensitive information should be disclosed. Now, that doesn't suit some of the people shaking their head opposite me, but it is absolutely the fact. And you wouldn't expect legal advice that was given to your lawyer to be disclosed anywhere else but you. Now, it's absurd to think otherwise. Now, Councillor Bridgman has put it absolutely perfectly. I won't add any more to it. And we should vote for the recommendation.
Thank you, members. Councillor Doherty, sorry.
Oh, yes. Before we go to the vote, I'd just like to raise a point of order. Councillor Martha Vickers left for this debate and returned during the debate, and I'm not sure if that's acceptable.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. Members would be advised, members need to be present in the chamber during the debate in order to hear all relevant information. I'm aware that Martha Councillor Martha Vickers had left the chamber. I have advised previously that if members missed the introduction, that is generally okay, assuming that they have read the papers. I'm aware that we had moved into the debate when Martha Vickers returned, so my advice would be that Councillor Martha Vickers shouldn't vote. It is a matter for Councillor Vickers to determine, but that would be my advice. It is advice that I have given previously in other meetings, and that's.
Okay, I'll ask you to take note of that advice, Councillor Vickers. Thank you.
I think a number of members. Yeah, indeed, but I think Councillor Vickers is indicating that other members left the chamber. Other members left the chamber because they've declared an interest in various items, and they'd left and then returned.
That was earlier items. Right, members, we should move to a vote now. Then I'll ask the monitoring officer to conduct that vote. And can I, for this as an important and sensitive item, ask you to use your microphones again, please?
Thank you, members. I'll ask the Zoom host to now display on the screens and on members' microphones the proposal in respect of item 18. And I'll ask that members vote accordingly. Can you scroll down the screen?
Jeff Mays, vote against, please. Jeff Mays. Vote no, please.
I don't think that's Councillor Brooks.
If he made a mistake,
Councillor Brooks.
put it right.
Councillor Brooks, that's not.
This group tonight.
That's not acceptable. To look at the vote and then ask someone to change their vote is not acceptable. We have a situation. Let's deal with it. That's the.
Chairman,
I am. Thank you.
I'm sure you're impartial. Have to put it back to abstain. Jeff Mays. Thank you.
Scroll down. Scroll down.
It's got to put it back to abstain. That's the chairman's ruling.
Three. He hasn't put it back.
Yeah, so I think it's if Jeff's goes back to abstain, and if Councillor Mays is indicating that the vote will be abstain, then the vote is tied on 16 for and 16 against, and then that would come down to being a matter for the chairman's casting vote.
Correct.
Councillor Mays, what are you doing?
I don't know. That's why I abstained.
It's abstained.
But you've now changed your vote to no.
Yeah, I think.
So could you move it back to abstain, please?
I've done that twice.
I think we can accept Councillor.
All right.
Councillor Mays has given an indication.
Mr. Chair, as a point of order, I think we could accept retaking the vote.
Can we hear what's going on, please?
But having Mr. Chairman, I would think the members of council could accept retaking the vote. I don't think we can have a vote on the screen and then be discussing whether his vote is for, her vote's against, or whatever. And maybe I'll make that an abstention. But what's happened has not gone well. Let's redo it.
Point of order, Chairman. That is exactly what Councillor Jeff Brooks did to the councillor over there. So that is exactly what he did once he'd cast his vote.
I understand. Let me just discuss this with the monitoring officer.
I think Chairman Councillor Mays has indicated that he wishes to abstain from this vote. I think therefore that is how Councillor Mays' vote should be accepted, which would indicate that the vote is tied, 16 members for the proposal, 16 members against, which would then leave the matter in the hands of the chairman to use his casting vote.
I must refer you, as a point of order, information, call it what you will. I was extremely magnanimous to Councillor Hooker, the chairman, when a vote went wrong because of this clunky system we have. And hang on, and people were confused. And I was magnanimous enough to say, let that vote. Councillor Hooker voted wrongly, and I was magnanimous enough to let that vote be changed.
Councillor Brooks, that is a different case. Councillor Mays...
Which certainly was not.
Councillor Mays indicated that he wishes to abstain. You forced him to change, and that is not acceptable. Right? I'm sorry, that is not acceptable. And with the only reason you could do that is because of this system which you denigrate. So I'm sorry, but you have taken a bit of technology and I think in this case misused it. I'm sorry.
So Chairman, I would invite you to use your casting vote.
I will use my casting vote
to determine the matter.
I'll use my casting vote. I have no option.
Thank you, Chair. How do you wish to use your casting vote? In favour of the proposal or against?
In favour.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's because again, you use your position to.
Members, that was the last item on the agenda. Members, that was the last item on the agenda. I'd like to close the meeting at that point. Thank you for your attention and your attendance.
Thank you, Chairman.